Chapter 2185, Rolling Rocks. Chapter 2185, Rolling Rocks. After walking for a day, the mountain path began to slant. Slightly further ahead, two mountain paths had joined and become one. If they continued upwards, the mountain paths would continue to join and ultimately become a single mountain path that would lead right up to the Dragon's Gate. After another day's journey, the mountain paths joined once more, and this time it was four joined into one. Everyone could feel the difficulties of their journey. It was as if they had become mortals. But the object they had to conquer was a mountain that ascended to the heavens. How could they possibly succeed in such a feat? Thus, it was not strength, cultivation level, or natural talent that was required to ascend the Dragon's Gate mountain, but rather only a determined will and the courage to conquer all. Ling Han included. The pressure that everyone had to sustain was actually different. Even if Ling Han had cultivated the dividing 9 souls and had 9 source powers of heaven and earth, he did not have any advantage in this place at all, either. Everyone was soaked in sweat and felt extremely weary. They wanted nothing more than to stop for a rest, or even turn right around and descend the mountain. True elites would have to have willpower as strong and firm as iron. We must all forge on. Another day passed, and it was no longer the barren mountain path ahead of them. Instead, a group of people had appeared, and they were presently seated on rocks for a rest. These people had also heard the noise created by Ling Han and his group as they climbed, and turned their eyes towards them, a vigilant expression immediately appearing on their faces. In this place, a high cultivation level was not of much use. Even an ascending origin tier could possibly be killed by a severing, mundane tier. There were a total of 9 people in this group, and a purple-robed, middle-aged man stood up from the group and shouted at Ling Han, "Friend, don't go any further." "Why?" Ling Han asked smilingly. "If you continue onwards, we will consider you an enemy and kill you," this purple-robed large man declared, a powerful killing intent appearing in his expression. This group of people were all members of the Battle Dragon Palace, and the purple-robed large man, their leader, was an ascending origin tier elite. However, what was important here was merely willpower and not cultivation level, and these people all belonged to the category of weaker willpower. Thus, they continuously stopped to rest, and had already split off from the rest of the majority. At present, everyone had practically been weakened to mortal level. So what if he was an ascending origin tier? Thus, they all feared that Ling Han and his group would use force, and naturally hoped that they would not come nearer, but would instead mind their own business. Ling Han thought of the storm of darkness. Suppressing his anger, he said, "Don't worry. There is no previous grudge between us, and conflict will not rise between us. Thus, you guys just have to quietly sit there, and we will only pass you by on our way up the mountain." "Ha! You actually plan to take advantage of the chance to launch an ambush on us, right?" someone from the Battle Dragon Palace called out. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. These people themselves were vile, mean characters, and thought everyone else were the same as them. He had initially been unwilling to further weaken the strength of the celestial realm on the basis of his considerations of the storm of darkness, but upon further thought, what were these vile characters useful for? To be blunt, they might probably be the first batch of traitors when the storm of darkness invaded. There was no need to be polite, nor was there anything to be polite about. Ling Han strode forwards. "Since you are unwilling to listen to nice words, I can only resort to force." "Ha, brat, you've shown your true colors now, haven't you?" The members of the Battle Dragon Palace all pointed at Ling Han. "I've seen through your paltry tricks now," written all over their proud expressions. Ling Han didn't even bother to give them any regard. He strode forwards, his hands balling into fists, which he shot forwards. Pum, pum, pum. Not one of them was a match for him, and they were all sent flying with a single punch. Even if their cultivation levels were all at Mountain River tier, the advantage of Ling Han having cultivated to the 5th severance and having 9 divided souls would not be erased. It would only be weakened, but he would still be incredibly powerful. The heaven and earth were just pulling everyone's cultivation level to the same level. But because the heaven and earth were just the heaven and earth also would not ignore the amount of effort that you had placed cultivating to the fifth severance, forming 9 divided souls, and so on. Let's go. They continued climbing. Another 3 days later, the women were finally worn out and had to stop for a rest. They ingested some alchemical pills at the same time to replenish their greatly expended origin power. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Hunyo feasted. Their body arts were extremely brilliant and could be extraordinarily useful here because stamina could be recovered by simply eating, unlike origin power, which required absorbing spiritual qi. In this manner, they stopped and climbed and stopped, and about a month later, 18 branch paths had joined into one, and there appeared multiple massive rolling rocks ahead of them. A great many people were pushing these rocks up the mountain, and they were all covered in sweat, veins popping on their foreheads in their exertion. Some could not persist, and the moment they let go, the rolling rocks would instantly press towards them, pushing them down onto the ground and heavily rolling over them. Pum! The strange thing was the rolling rocks did not roll all the way downhill, but rather stopped bizarrely in a spot that was about 30 meters uphill of Ling Han, as if there was an invisible wall that had stopped their progress. It was naturally impossible that these people would be pushing these rocks for no reason. It had surely been a necessary choice. Let's give it a try. Ling Han walked further up the mountain, but immediately discovered that not only the rocks were blocked by an invisible wall, but he himself was too. He tried to push a rolling rock, yet discovered that this rock was actually capable of passing through that wall, allowing him to continue his progress onwards. However, this rock was too heavy, and he was immediately sweating profusely. Ling Han stopped after trying for a short while, and returned the rolling rock to its position. Then he tried to directly tear a hole through that invisible wall. But no matter what he did, it was all fruitless. Pooh! Someone immediately spluttered out in laughter. Idiot! Wasn't it obvious? Everyone was pushing rocks here. Did you think that they were all fools? Ling Han glanced at him, but did not speak. If they were to do the same as everyone else, how were they supposed to stand out from the rest? Of course, perhaps the only method was really to push the rock up the mountain. But choosing to go with the flow without even making his own attempts, how could this kind of person possibly have any future? In this place, Ling Han's 9 source powers of heaven and earth seemed to have entered into a deep slumber, and his divided souls naturally could not be released, either. He was not the only one. Hunyo and the Empress were the same as well, causing their battle prowess to be weakened to an unprecedented level. Thus, Ling Han was even less capable of breaking through this invisible wall. Hey, what are you glaring at me for? The person that had previously scoffed at Ling Han actually didn't give it up and shouted at Ling Han, "What is it? Are you asking for a fight?" Ling Han ignored him. It looked like the only way really was to push the rock up the mountain. The reason he wanted to find out if there were other ways was naturally out of consideration for the women. He feared that some among them would not be able to hold on. Then, not only would they be unable to advance into severing mundane tier, even their lives would possibly be at risk. Previously, he had seen some people being crushed by the rolling rocks, and they had directly died from the impact. Seeing how Ling Han was unwilling to even respond, that person naturally was mad with fury. With great strides, he rushed towards Ling Han. Pum! He had not reached him when he was sent flying with a punch from a green-robed young man. Brother Ling. The green-robed young man greeted with a grin. Ling Han turned around and couldn't help but feel shocked as he replied, "Brother Yen." This person was actually Yen Xianlu. After entering this place, Ling Han had naturally regained his original appearance. "Haha, long time no see." Yen Xianlu clapped a hand on Ling Han's shoulder, then leaned towards him and whispered, "I have already joined the alliance, so please take care of me in the future, Brother Ling." Ling Han faltered. He had not thought that he would have been so fast, and had already managed to gather a group of people to him. He smiled widely and answered, "Of course." "That's right, Brother Ling. Just what level has your strength reached by now that you can make Yi submit willingly to you, and be so utterly impressed with you?" Yan Xianlu was extremely curious. He knew just how strong Yi was, but Yi's expression was filled with reverence when he mentioned Ling Han. This kind of expression, appearing on the face of a monarch tier, was an absolutely inconceivable matter. "Merely dividing soul tier," Ling Han said. "Oh." Yan Xianlu nodded, but was not overly surprised. Chapter 2186, Troublemaker. Chapter 2186, Troublemaker. Yan Xianlu himself was a dividing soul tier, but he had just advanced to the Yang soul. Thus, he estimated that Ling Han had to also be either Yang soul or Yin soul, so it was natural that he wouldn't be too astounded. Of course, if he knew that not only had Ling Han formed 9 divided souls, he was capable of insta-killing even a third secret immortal palace tier. The expression on his face would definitely be filled with explosive shock. Ling Han was quite concerned about the matter of the alliance, and asked, "Brother Yan, just how far has our alliance progressed by now?" "The flow is good." Yan Xianlu nodded first, but then he sighed. "However, there are a few troublemakers that are not so easily dealt with. They are not impressed by Yi, nor are they convinced by you, an alliance leader who hasn't even shown his face before, and are presently rubbing their hands, just waiting to defeat you when you appear so they can snatch the position of the alliance leader." Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. In terms of battle, he had never feared anyone. "Looks like the only way is to push the rocks up the mountain." There were rolling rocks everywhere here, and everyone could easily find one. Then they would be pushing the rock up the mountain on their ascent. 1 step, 2 steps, and everyone was covered in sweat after only a while, and they all wanted to stop for a rest. But they were pushing a rock uphill. How could they possibly stop for a rest? They could either withdraw themselves and step aside, allowing the rock to roll back downhill, but they themselves would also be pushed downhill or become exhausted and be crushed by the rolling rock. Even if they escaped death, they would still be severely injured. Only by gritting their teeth and forging onwards would they be able to successfully crash through this barrier. Everyone was aware of this fact, but there were often limits to human power. Once they had surpassed their own limits, their willpower would begin to give in. Hence, this was a test of willpower. They continued to climb the mountain, but their progress became slower and slower. Ling Han continued to cheer the women on. They had gone too long without battle, and their willpower naturally would not be too steady. Only their love for Ling Han was pushing them onwards. And Ling Han was also stirring up their love for him so that they would continue to forge on and stay determined. There could be a great many reasons for determination, such as a yearning for power, the motivation of revenge, and love. The women all forged on determinedly. The level of the severing mundane tier was too important, a dividing line between mortal and immortal. Thus, they had to be able to deliver a strike to the heaven and earth to advance to the severing mundane tier. Otherwise, even if they could become severing mundane tiers, what would be severed would only be their love for Ling Han. This was something that they would definitely not allow. Hence, this ignited an incredibly firm belief in them as they used their slender, delicate hands to push the rocks uphill, allowing sweat to soak them, yet still determined not to give up. Ling Han couldn't help but be impressed by the power of love. If it was hatred, one definitely could not possibly hold on for so long, but love was capable of it. 5 days, 10 days, and not one of the women gave up. All their eyes were firm and steady, as if they were completely transformed. Ling Han involuntarily nodded. It was no wonder that one could only leap over the dragon's gate after experiencing so many tests. That was because if they had not experienced this, how could firm willpower be developed? And how then would they be able to become supremely extraordinary geniuses? A determined person might not be able to become a monarch tier but those that had become monarch tiers definitely had iron willpower. A month later, they suddenly felt their hands lighten. Those massive rolling rocks had actually vanished. They were first stunned, and then realization dawned on them suddenly. As it turned out, they had passed this test. Instantly, everyone slumped onto the ground, panting heavily. Their journey here was really too difficult. Ling Han looked at the women with gratification. Now that they had passed this test, it was as if everyone's spirits had been reborn. However, there are a great many tests still waiting for us. He raised his head and looked towards the summit, but still could not catch a glimpse of the summit. Who knew how far away it still was? That's right. How has Brother Yin come so quickly here? Ling Han asked casually. Oh, my master deliberately sent me here, Yan Xinlu said. However, one can only leap once over the dragon's gate. Multiple times would not have any effect, and my master has leaped over the dragon's gate 5 epochs ago. Thus, he has only sent me here this time, and has long since returned. What a truly good master! Ling Han nodded. Going by that logic, those celestial kings that were older than an epoch had probably already leaped over the dragon's gate, and would not come in and join in on the excitement here. If any celestial kings came here, their age would definitely be less than an epoch. To say anyone could become a celestial king, yet had not even leaped over the dragon's gate, who would believe it? Too bad, he had actually wanted to find a few celestial kings to beat up. What a coincidence! Yan Xianlu suddenly stood up and looked downhill. Ling Han's eyes followed his gaze, and saw 3 young people that were presently pushing a rolling rock upwards each. Though they were all soaked in sweat, all their eyes were extremely bright, their fighting spirit soaring sky-high. Cheng Zixin, Fu Zhou, Hixinjue, Yan Xianlu said, turning his head, revealing the names of these 3 people. Do you still remember how I said that there are a great many people that are not willing to submit to you as the alliance leader in the alliance? These 3 people are the ones causing the most noise. As they spoke, the 3 people had also passed this test and walked towards Yan Xianlu. Brother Cheng, Brother Fu, Brother He. Yan Xianlu clasped his hands and greeted the 3 of them respectively. Yet these 3 people were extremely proud and were completely aloof. They did indeed were qualified for it because they were all earth souls and monarch tiers as well. They would be able to suppress Yan Xianlu easily. You are. Cheng Zixin stared at Ling Han. Brother Fu, Brother He, isn't this person a little familiar? Now that you say it, I remember. Isn't this our alliance leader, Ling Han? Fu Zhou suddenly smiled. They had all seen Ling Han's memory image before. Indeed. Hixinjue nodded as well. Alliance leader Ling, how about a match? Fu Zhou asked proudly. Even if there was a restriction to their cultivation levels, he was not afraid. In a battle of equals, even if his opponent was a celestial king, he was still confident of his victory. Prodigies were all prideful, and Ling Han could accept that. He stood up. Sure, then let's exchange a few moves. Fu Zhou moved and launched an attack at Ling Han. Monarch tiers were monarch tiers. Even if their cultivation level had been restricted to the mountain river tier, his battle prowess still far surpassed that. His incredibly domineering punch shot forth. Ling Han parried the blow casually. Pung! Fu Zhou's punch had landed on the palm of his hand, yet did not cause the slightest sound, as if all of its force had been swallowed up. Fu Zhou showed a hint of surprise. Not bad, you do have some strength. Meanwhile, Ling Han shook his arm lightly and sent Fu Zhou backwards. Then he pointed a finger at Cheng Zixin and Hixinjue. The 2 of you can fight me together. Hixinjue and Cheng Zixin exchanged a look, and both erupted into laughter. We have never had the habit of joining forces, nor is there any need for it. They each quipped. Fu Zhou, meanwhile, was furious. With himself as the opponent, Ling Han actually dared to challenge Cheng Zixin and He Xinjue at the same time. Just how much was he belittling him? "You are truly arrogant." He leaped back and shot out another punch at Ling Han. Ling Han paid him no regard, but instead charged towards Cheng Zixin and He Xinjue. He, too, shot out a fist, which turned into two punches that blasted towards the duo. Damn it! Both were enraged. They naturally disdained joining forces with another, but they could not bear such provocation from Ling Han, either. They both roared furiously and countered respectively. Pung! 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 The three of them were instantly entangled in battle. Ling Han was confident he would be able to subdue these three people within 100 moves if there hadn't been restrictions on his cultivation level, even if he had still been an Earth Soul and had not formed 9 divided souls. But now that his cultivation level had been suppressed to the mountain river tier, his advantage in battle prowess had also been endlessly reduced, so he could only battle Cheng Zixin and the others to a tie. However, Cheng Zixin and the others were shocked to death. Chapter 2187 Yield. Chapter 2187 Yield. 3 great monarch tiers were working together, and even then they were actually only capable of fighting Ling Han to a tie. It should be known that the greater the restrictions on cultivation level, the smaller the advantage they would have as those who have attained the 5th severance and formed the strongest divided soul. For example, 100 was greater than 90 by 10, but everyone had been weakened 10 times. In that case, 10 was only greater than 9 by 1, and the advantage would correspondingly shrink tenfold. Vice versa, if the restrictions on cultivation level was lifted, then wouldn't Ling Han be even more heaven-defyingly powerful? Cheng Zixin and the others were all shaking their heads inwardly. Perhaps Ling Han was only a Yin soul or even a Yang soul. In that case, without the restriction of cultivation level, any one of them would be able to easily suppress Ling Han. However, that was a matter for the future. At present, though, Ling Han was heavily suppressing them in a battle of 3 against 1. And no matter how they used various celestial techniques, it was of no help in the situation. They were all extremely resentful. That was because after their cultivation levels had been restricted, a great many celestial techniques were no longer usable, causing them to feel like they were tied up, which was incredibly horrible. However, they did not know that the person under the heaviest restriction was Ling Han. His strongest deadly attack was the great clash of source powers, but now all 9 source powers of heaven and earth had entered into slumber and could not be used at all. Otherwise, Ling Han would have been able to insta-kill all 3 of them with the first move. Yet Ling Han was completely unconcerned. He had already created his own path. The great clash of source powers was only one of his deadly attacks, and he would eventually give it up even if the 5 elements could all be improved to the level of the 9th heaven celestial king. It was useless. Ling Han's goal was the heavenly venerable tier, even if he managed to advance them to the 9th heaven celestial king level. So what? He definitely would not think of them as his true trump cards. He used Fists of Fury, and his aura immediately changed. It was as if he was a primitive emperor that had descended, exuding a domineering air that could suppress one and all. Cheng Zixin and the others all paled in shock. Standing in front of Ling Han, they felt very tiny, as if the latter could crush them to dust with a casual punch. For better or worse, they were still monarch tiers, so they hurriedly suppressed the fear in their hearts, burning their fighting spirit as much as possible and going all out in battle. Ling Han nodded inwardly. The fighting spirit of this trio was worth recognition, and what he wanted was precisely this kind of talent. Otherwise, when they met with the storm of darkness in the future, wouldn't they instantly weaken and flee from battle when they saw how there were more numbers and more elites on the opposing side? He had the mind to make these 3 submit to him, and thus did not use his full power, and merely used Fists of Fury to suppress the trio. Cheng Zixin and the others were all shouting in fury, but it was completely useless. On the level of the mountain river tier, Ling Han was invincible, and even if it was a ninth heaven celestial king, it would still be the same. After fighting for half a day, Ling Han suddenly stopped and asked smilingly, "How about it? Yield?" "No way!" Cheng Zixin and the others all exclaimed. They were unconvinced and thought that it was the cultivation level that restricted their movements. Otherwise, how could it be possible that the three of them working together were still no match for Ling Han? Ling Han could see their defiance and thus said, "All right. Then, when we go out, we'll have another match." Cheng Zixin and the others looked at one another and nodded in unison. Though they were not convinced, they had completely acknowledged Ling Han's strength. In a battle of equal levels, they were no match for him, and there was nothing to say about that. "Brother Fu, Brother Cheng, Brother He, come, sit, sit, sit," Yan Xinlu said smilingly. He naturally was playing the role of mediator. Otherwise, with how these three people had just been beaten by Ling Han, how could they bring themselves to stay? Indeed, Fu Zhou and the others were initially planning to leave, but firstly, Yan Xinlu had spoken up and invited them, and secondly, they did need to rest and recover their energy. Thus, they nodded and sat cross-legged on the ground, taking out alchemical pills to ingest. However, they had just taken their alchemical pills out when their vision blurred. Ling Han had actually snatched their alchemical pills. The trio stood up. "You've gone too far, haven't you? Do you plan on humiliating us?" Ling Han smiled and tossed out 3 alchemical pill bottles with a wave of his hand. "Use the alchemical pills I concoct." The 3 of them took the pill bottles, exchanged looks, and then doubtfully removed the cork of the bottle. After they poured out the alchemical pills, they immediately looked stunned. "Primordial heart, nurturing pill." Ling Han nodded slightly. They recognized this kind of alchemical pill, as expected of monarch tiers. Primordial heart, nurturing pill, a 3-star alchemical pill, and even among 3-star alchemical pills, it can be ranked in the upper echelons. For those below ascending origin tier, this is the best alchemical pill for recovering origin power. Furthermore, it's a 6th refinement at that. The 3 of them spoke one after another, showing that they had considerable knowledge regarding alchemical pills as well. This was natural. Though they were not alchemists themselves, as cultivators, they had to have a very detailed understanding of alchemical pills as well. Otherwise, how would they know if they had made a profit or loss should they purchase an alchemical pill at the auction house? Or if they should obtain one in an ancient site, how would they know if it could be ingested? Why wasn't it a 4-star alchemical pill? Wasn't Ling Han capable of concocting such an alchemical pill? This was not Ling Han being stingy, but that 4-star alchemical pills were prepared for ascending origin tiers. And why was ascending origin tier called ascending origin tier? That was because the origin power in their bodies was soaring, turning into source power. If cultivators of the Mortal Palace tier or below ingested this kind of alchemical pill, they would definitely explode and die from the force. "You concocted this?" Fu Zhou asked in disbelief. Though this was only a 3-star alchemical pill, what did 6th refinement mean? Ling Han definitely had to be a 4-star alchemist. In terms of pure status, 4-star alchemists would definitely be superior to dividing soul tiers, and superior by an unknown amount at that. Ling Han smiled slightly and answered, "That's right." Gask. Fu Zhou and the others all inhaled sharply, appearing incredibly stunned. "Fuck, are you even human? Not only are you a monarch tier, you are also an alchemist and a 4-star grandmaster at that. Monster, an absolute monster." However, it was also precisely because of this that the conflicted feelings that Fu Zhou and his group felt towards Ling Han decreased considerably. A 4-star grandmaster, and one that was so young, had extremely high hopes of advancing to become a 5-star alchemist. And once Ling Han became a 5-star alchemist, to say nothing of them, even celestial kings would be very polite upon meeting him. "Brother Ling." They paid their greetings to Ling Han again, and this time their manner was filled with sincerity, and they now considered him important. Of course, they had not been fully convinced yet. After leaving this place, they would definitely have another fierce battle with Ling Han again. Ling Han nodded and said, "Recover your vitality. Quickly. We still have to climb the mountain." They continued to recover their vitality, and after half a day, Fu Zhou and his group opened their eyes at the same time. They had completely recuperated, as expected of the primordial heart nurturing pill, and it's a 6th refinement at that. Merely a single pill is enough to help me recover practically all my vitality. And if it was our own alchemical pills, one would only help to recover about 30% of our power, and the more alchemical pills ingested, the stronger the immunity would be. Not only would its effects drop drastically, it would also leave behind alchemic poison in the body. The trio were all profuse with their praise. Previously, they had only known that this alchemical pill was good, but they had completely no knowledge of the extent of its benefits. They only knew after trying it out themselves. "Let's go." The group continued their climb, and after journeying for a stretch, they discovered that the air was getting thinner and thinner, causing their faces to become incredibly pale and their bodies to sway, practically about to pass out. After advancing into the flower blossom tier, cultivators would be able to fly in the skies and tunnel through the ground, no longer requiring ordinary food or even air to breathe. As long as there was spiritual qi, they could stay alive. Yet now they actually felt difficulties in breathing. How could this not be extremely illogical? Clearly, this was another test from the heaven and earth. "Hold on." Ling Han cheered the women on. If there was anyone that really could not bear it, he could only draw them into the Black Tower. He could not really allow them to die here, after all, right? Chapter 2188. Encountering Second Brother Again. Chapter 2188. Encountering Second Brother Again. The air here was extremely thin, causing a group of people who had cultivated to the celestial level to actually have difficulties with breathing. It could not be denied that the power of the heaven and earth was really too frightening. No matter how much you struggled, you could still only play within the limits allowed by the heaven and earth. You see, you had thought you had already transcended, but in truth you could not escape from the palm of the heaven and earth at all. The expressions of Ling Han, Yan Xianlu, Chang Zixin, and the others were all slightly ugly. Their ambitions were lofty, and their pursuit was to escape from the shackles of heaven and earth. But from the look of things now, it was easier than done. Perhaps only after becoming celestial kings would they just barely gain the right to play against heaven and earth. A 9th heaven celestial king was equal to the heaven and earth, and the only method to transcend heaven and earth was to become a heavenly venerate. Ling Han clenched his fists, his resolve even firmer than before. "You can do it!" He continuously encouraged the women, and Chang Zixin and his group could not understand this. Even Yan Xianlu could not really accept it. As they saw it, cultivation should be emotionless. How could one possibly reach great accomplishments with so many concerns on his mind? Not only did Ling Han prize romantic affections, he also had a large number of lovers, and he could actually progress quickly to stand out from the rest. Even with that? Inconceivable. The further uphill they went, the more frightening the thinness of the air became. They had all sunk into a powerful state of suffocation, their breaths becoming extremely hurried. They all felt that the air they inhaled with each breath was not enough for their use, and they could only suck in large mouthfuls of air with each inhalation. But the more this was the case, the greater the toll on their stamina, causing them to feel extremely horrible, wanting nothing more than to just lie down and rest to their heart's content. If they lay down here, they would never be able to wake up again. Though the heaven and earth wanted to nurture talent, what was the use of trash without a firm determination? Surpassing Ling Han's expectations, none in Helian Xuanxue's group fell back, nor did any one of them truly pass out. Instead, they all gritted their teeth and forged on. Even Yi Shuang and the Lunar King were no exceptions. They could see a great many people fallen on the ground on their way. Some still had a sliver of life, while for others, even their spirits had been destroyed. Climbing the Dragon's Gate mountain and leaping over the Dragon's Gate had never been an easy feat, but was instead filled with danger. Ling Han did not interfere by drawing those people that had fallen on the ground but were still alive into a spatial god tool. Perhaps there were some among them that had great willpower and could emerge victorious over the heaven and earth, overcome their own limits, and stand back up with their own power, right? This was a deadly test, as well as a great opportunity. Over a dozen days later, they suddenly felt their breaths tremble, and that feeling as if they could die from suffocation at any moment disappeared. As it turned out, they had already walked out of the test for the second stage. Instantly, everyone slumped onto the ground, panting heavily. This test from heaven and earth is really harsh, Cheng Zixin panted. At this time, he couldn't bother with his image as a monarch tier anymore, and flopped onto the ground, his forehead covered with sweat. Fu Zhou put on a calm air and asked, "It's just tempering your willpower. Brother Cheng, could it be that you can no longer take it?" Cheng Zixin pointed downhill. "If you're so capable, then you can just go downhill and do it again. I'm no idiot. I wouldn't do something so senseless." Fu Zhou naturally refused. If he really fell for this provocation, then he would really be an idiot. Again, Ling Han took out some primordial heart nurturing pills for everyone. This alchemical pill was already a great item for recovering origin power, and added with his 6th refinement, not only were its recovery effects even better, the immunity to this alchemical pill would also be far lesser than with other alchemical pills. Very soon, everyone had recovered their vitality and became energized again. "I will definitely not come a second time to this damn mountain," Yan Shenlu declared, shaking his head. "Haha, that's exactly what I thought." He Xinjue laughed. They were just about to continue the climb when they heard sounds of battle coming from the distance. Very soon, for people appeared in their sight. However, it was not a battle of 2 against 2, but rather a battle of 3 against 1. The sole person had fallen into a disadvantage, but his movements were great and wide, possessing the domineering air of one who was an emperor, and all subjects would be bowing in submission to him. He was steady in his defense, and was still far from defeat. In fact, this was possibly him looking for an opening, and he could possibly launch a fierce counterattack at any moment, turning the situation on its head. Though this person's fist technique isn't that polished, it has a supreme air of dominance. Fu Zhou immediately looked stunned. He Xinjue nodded. "That's right. I have a feeling that this fist technique was created by this person himself. But limited by cultivation level, the power of the fist technique is still not very strong. However, because he has invented it himself, it is the path that suits him the best, so he is able to show might that is beyond expectations. To say nothing else, merely with this air of dominance, this powerful self-confidence, this person would definitely become greatly accomplished." Cheng Zixin also gave a very high assessment. However, Ling Han's mouth was half gaping, a stunned expression on his face. "Isn't this second brother?" Hunyo asked, slanting her forehead. She naturally went along with the way Ling Han addressed him. "The Rain Emperor." The Empress also nodded. This man that was battling 3 people alone and had been given such a high assessment from Fu Zhou and his group was actually the Rain Emperor. After entering into the celestial realm, the Rain Emperor had left by himself not long after. He planned to journey in this new heaven and earth, and was unwilling to be protected by Ling Han, because his ambitions were lofty, and to be protected by another was not the path he walked. Since they parted, it had been more than 10,000 years, and Ling Han had never gotten any news of the Rain Emperor. He had not thought that he would actually encounter him here. "Rain Emperor, You won't be able to escape today. Xiao, another figure charged out, joining the battle. This time, it had become a battle of 4 against 1. However, that was not the end of it. Another 2 figures appeared, charging forwards with twisted expressions on their faces, similarly aiming directly for the Rain Emperor. 6 against 1. Even if the Rain Emperor had astonishing battle prowess, in a battle of 6 against 1, and with his cultivation level restricted to Mountain River tier, his advantage of the 5th severance and the like had been endlessly reduced. Immediately, he was in a critical situation. You have joined our great sect, but for 3,000 years, and not only have you become a holy son, you actually even dared to think of cultivating the mighty benevolent scroll. That is a supreme secret technique that only the sect master can cultivate. What would we be then? We'll send you on your way to the afterlife today. The 6 of them all used ultimate moves, each aiming to deliver a fatal strike. Though Ling Han was not yet sure of the situation, with his second brother in danger, how could he possibly just sit by and watch? Xiao, he immediately charged into the battle with a battle cry, brandishing his fists and launching an offensive at the 6 of them. Second brother, I've come. The Rain Emperor only glanced at him and then burst into laughter. Fourth brother, you have come just in time. Pum! Ling Han forcibly tore an opening into the battle and stood back to back with the Rain Emperor. The brothers were both barehanded, yet were like 2 great emperors from the primordial age, capable of suppressing one and all. Among the group of 6, a white-robed young man shouted, "Who are you? Why are you interfering? Are you an idiot?" Ling Han scoffed. "This is my second brother. I am his 4th brother, and you are asking me why I am interfering." The 6 of them couldn't help but feel gloomy. Wasn't the Rain Emperor all alone? Why had a 4th brother suddenly appeared out of nowhere? Then wouldn't there be a 1st brother and 3rd brother as well? Where were they then? Friend, a wise man looks after his own hide. We are determined to kill him today, and if you join in, we will only be killing another person. What's the point? A green-robed young man advised. We are all monarch tiers, so do you think you can stop us? Ling Han scoffed. So what if they were monarch tiers? He couldn't even remember how many monarch tiers he had killed by now. He stated calmly, "You are trying to compare numbers, aren't you? Come, wives, brothers, come out for a show." He, Hunyo, Yan Xianlu, and the others all stepped out, each of them exuding a forceful aura. Chapter 2189, Brothers Join Forces. Chapter 2189, Brothers Join Forces. In a battle of equals, King Tiers could use numbers to overwhelm the opposing side, but it would be very difficult for Emperor Tiers to do so. Even if they could overwhelm their enemies with numbers, they would need the combined forces of a great many Emperor Tiers. And in the case of Monarch Tiers, it was practically impossible to kill that kind of opponent. At the beginning, the 6 of them were brimming with confidence. Even if Ling Han and the Rain Emperor were both Monarch Tiers, there were 6 Monarch Tiers against 2 Monarch Tiers, so even if there were some additional pawn soldiers added to the equation, what could it do? They would only be crushed into dust. However, when Yan Xianlu and the others walked out, the 6 people immediately looked stunned because the aura that these people were exuding was world-shaking. Which one of them was not a giant among men? Monarch Tiers, they were all Monarch Tiers. How could this be possible? Usually it was very rare for even a great sect of the Celestial King Tier to have a Monarch Tier heir. Only those 5th Heaven Celestial King Tier forces and above could nurture this kind of prodigy, and only one such heir would exist in each era. Only a 9th Heaven Celestial King Tier sect could simultaneously nurture a considerable number of Monarch Tier heirs. For example, the Great Majestic sect. Even among 9th Heaven Celestial King Tier forces, the Great Majestic sect was one of the finest existences, practically the king of the entire celestial realm, an invincible, great emperor. But what was going on here now? With a simple tug, so many monarch tears had popped out. You are Yan Xianlu. You are Cheng Zixin. Fu Zhou. He Xinjue. These 6 people actually recognized Yan Xianlu and the others, though they were not familiar with the Empress, Hunyo, and the other women. Zhan Fei. Yan Xianlu nodded, looking at one of them. Feng Xingren. Cheng Zixin also looked towards another person. It looked like these people were all monarch tears of the Eastern celestial realm, and they might have met each other before, or heard of them, or seen their memory images. Brother Yan, give me some face, and don't get involved in this messy situation, Zhan Fei stated solemnly. In a one-on-one battle, he had the confidence to defeat Yan Xinlu, but in a battle royale, the Rain Emperor was too strong, so with the additional help of another monarch tier, the difficulty level of killing him would be multiplied several times over. Yan Xianlu shook his head. I would instead like to ask Brother Zhan to give me some face and stop here, all right? On the other side, Feng Xingren was also asking Cheng Zixin for some face, and was similarly met with rejection from Cheng Zixin. The latter planned to play the role of mediator and resolve the grudges between the two sides. Are you insisting on a battle? Zhan Fei's expression darkened. They were determined to kill the Rain Emperor today. This young man was too frightening. He had just joined the sect for 3,000 years, yet had already charged all the way from the position of an external disciple to the seat of Holy Sun, and now was even showing off more of his ability, causing the other Holy Sons to pale in comparison. If they did not kill him now, there couldn't be any other chances for them to do so in another few years. Brother Zhan, harmony is to be prized in all situations. Yan Xianlu only played mediator. Yet Ling Han shook his head and interrupted. Brother Yan, you guys step down first. The reason I asked you guys to come out was merely so that they could see just how many people we brothers have on our side. However, in an actual battle, us 2 brothers are enough. The Rain Emperor laughed. 4th brother, you are still as domineering as usual. Isn't 2nd brother the same? Ling Han laughed as well. 2 madmen. This was the thought that Zhan Fei and his group shared, yet they were pleased with how arrogant these 2 people were. Otherwise, with so many monarch tiers on their side and their cultivation levels being further weakened, they would not have much of an advantage, either, even if they were stronger. It was better now. A battle of 6 against 2 was going to be a sure win for them, no matter how they thought about it. Use your strongest moves from the start, and don't give them any chance to back out. The 6 people communicated through their divine senses. No matter how arrogant a person was, they could not possibly be an idiot. If they were outmatched, they would definitely call for help, so they definitely could not give them that opportunity. The Empress and Hunyo were naturally filled with confidence in Ling Han. They both immediately stepped back, and Yan Xianlu and the others also stepped back after a slight hesitation. After all, Ling Han had previously battled 3 of them all by himself, to the extent that Cheng Zixin and the other had completely given up. 2nd brother, it's all right to kill this trash, right? Ling Han asked. The lives of these 6 people were dependent only on the whims of the Rain Emperor. Just attack as you like. The Rain Emperor waved a hand. The so-called monarch tiers were completely below his notice. All right. Ling Han nodded. With this, he could really go all out. You 2 are truly arrogant. Zhan Fei exclaimed menacingly. He gave a signal, and the 6 great monarch tiers immediately moved simultaneously, launching an offensive at Ling Han and the Rain Emperor. Their main target was the latter. There was not the slightest significance to killing Ling Han. Hence, one of them was in charge of tying up Ling Han, while the remaining 5 launched deadly attacks on the Rain Emperor. So weak. Ling Han humphed and burst out with his full power using fists of fury. Boom! The fist intent reverberated out, causing everyone to feel the fury presently in Ling Han's heart. Fists of fury naturally could only show its full power in a state of fury. Pung, pung, pung. As a fist shot out, 3 people were instantly sent flying outwards. The Rain Emperor's eyes involuntarily lit up, and he declared, "Fourth brother, you have finally created your own path." Though it had always been Ling Han that had been the strongest in the past, the Rain Emperor had always worried about him. With how Ling Han kept to the routine, his future accomplishments would not possibly surpass predecessors, and he would be confined within set boundaries. Of course, this kind of confinement could possibly cause even most other celestial kings to be envious, because it could possibly reach the 8th heaven or even 9th heaven celestial king tier. But just going along with how others walked, how could he possibly transcend and leap out of the set boundaries of heaven and earth? And now, seeing Ling Han use this kind of fist technique, he felt naturally gratified. Ling Han had finally created his own path. I am still no match for second brother. Ling Han sighed. This second brother was a true natural and extraordinary prodigy. Long ago, when he was in the small world, he had already created his own Tao and walked his own path. The Rain Emperor was not like him, who had a heavenly venerable tier treasure like the Black Tower. Instead, all that he possessed was gained through his own power, yet he had still advanced into the ranks of monarch tiers. This was what was truly heaven-defying about him. Ling Han felt that he was inferior to his second brother if it was to be a fair competition. The Rain Emperor laughed. There is no precedent for my path. Fourth brother, you have started later, but have surpassed me now. He, too, brandished his fists, and it was similarly a fist technique. The might of his fist technique was inferior to Ling Han's, and only managed to force Feng Xingren and the others to back down. Yet Ling Han knew himself. This was because his fists of fury had a sliver of the source power of heaven and earth in them, so it was naturally heaven-defying. After this punch, Zhang Fei and the others all bore ugly expressions. One Rain Emperor just barely managed to match 3 of them, yet Ling Han was even stronger, sending 3 of them flying with a single punch. Furthermore, the latter still had a good few monarch tiers eyeing them covetously from the sidelines. How could they possibly succeed with this? It would only be wishful thinking. Let's go. They immediately made their decision. Fighting here would be too disadvantageous for them. They were all already heaven souls, while the Rain Emperor was merely an earth soul. Once they left this place, it could not be claimed that any one of them would be able to kill the Rain Emperor easily, but at least the joined forces of 2 of them were definitely capable of achieving that goal. The 6 of them raced towards the mountain peak. The restrictions of the heaven and earth here were too strong. Even a celestial king would find it very difficult to catch up with them. Ling Han wanted to pursue them, but was stopped by the Rain Emperor. Don't be concerned about that trash. They are just nice for me to practice my moves. In a battle of Earth Soul against Heaven Soul, he actually said 6 great Heaven Soul monarch tiers were only good enough for him to practice his moves. This second brother was really very ambitious. Ling Han laughed loudly and replied, I'll listen to second brother. He naturally would not take Zhang Fei and his group to heart, either. A true monarch tier should have an invincible heart. How could they possibly join forces with others to kill another because of mere jealousy? Merely because of this, he felt that these 6 people were completely beneath his notice. Come, let's talk as we walk. The Rain Emperor slung an arm around Ling Han's shoulders, and Ling Han did the same as well. The 2 brothers walked towards the mountain peak and spoke of what they had experienced in these many years. Chapter 2190 Summit. Chapter 2190 Summit. The Rain Emperor's experiences were naturally very rough. After he'd begun his lone journey, he had done odd jobs in powerful clans before, had been a disciple in inferior minor sects, had also been quick to repay debts of gratitude and vengeance, had been forced deep into the mountains, and had become a loner. However, he was extremely resilient. He had always been able to walk out of multiple dilemmas, and became stronger and stronger. The Rain Emperor's luck was not too bad, either. When he attained the fourth severance, he entered into an ancient site and obtained a natural peach seal, allowing him to achieve the fifth severance, and after advancing into dividing soul tier, he obtained the remains of a ninth heaven celestial king, which he then refined into his own body. What kind of benefits did that have? He achieved dividing 9 souls. To accomplish this, it was not absolutely necessary that one had to have 9 source powers of heaven and earth. For example, Ji Wuming had also formed 9 divided souls with the celestial king imprint from his last life, but Ling Han had not become a celestial king in his last life, nor had he obtained any celestial king remains, so he could only rely on the source powers of heaven and earth. In comparison, using the source powers of heaven and earth to form 9 divided souls was definitely superior. Even a ninth heaven celestial king could only stand equal to the heaven and earth instead of truly being capable of replacing the heaven and earth. Later, the Rain Emperor joined the great majestic sect, and very soon climbed from the position of an external disciple all the way to become a holy son. With his domineering air and strength, he definitely left his competitors far behind, causing all the other holy sons to pale in color next to his brilliance. Thus, he met with the combined targeting of a great many holy sons, which ultimately took the form of killing intent at Dragon's Gate Mountain as they launched an attack on him. However, the Dragon's Gate Mountain was very unique. Everyone's cultivation level would be suppressed to the mountain river tier, and the Rain Emperor had created his own techniques, forming his own path. In a situation of his cultivation level being suppressed, he would instead become stronger. Added with Ling Han's help, they had sent the 6 holy sons into panicked flight. Ling Han couldn't help but muse inwardly that this second brother's luck was actually overwhelmingly strong. He clearly did not have any heaven-defined treasure, nor was he a reincarnated ninth heaven celestial king, yet he still managed to attain dividing 9 souls. As long as he could break through the barrier of heaven's soul, the Rain Emperor would be able to form 9 divided souls as easily as splitting bamboo, looking down on all immortal palace tiers. This was a height that even the Empress and Hunyo could not reach. Ling Han was sure that there were indeed doted sons of heaven and earth in this world. Of course, the Rain Emperor himself was an extraordinary prodigy of cultivation, and this was an undeniable fact. The Dragon's Gate Mountain really had a variety of different tests of willpower. Thankfully, all of them either were monarch tiers or had something that supported their determination. Their willpower was like a sharp blade that became stronger and sturdier through being tempered. 7 years later, they could finally see the summit. Everyone looked overjoyed and hurriedly increased their pace. They could see that there was a stone doorway at the summit, and it looked quite ordinary, but hundreds of beasts were engraved on the doorframe, and they all looked vivid and lifelike. "These are all source beasts," someone said slowly, "the creatures that were born at the beginning of the heaven and earth. They carry a natural, intimidating air, and even if they are merely engravings, it can still be felt. Furthermore, aside from heaven and earth, there is not one person that can carve out the image of a source beast." Ling Han had heard that theory before and nodded internally. That was why it was said that the Dragon's Gate Mountain was nurtured by the heaven and earth. This was clear evidence. Now, it was only the last step that was left, leaping over the Dragon's Gate. Ling Han's gaze swept by. He actually spotted a few familiar faces. "Brother Ling." Someone walked over, clasping his hands in greeting towards Ling Han. Yulan Fenghua. His expression was filled with confidence. Not too long ago, he had successfully broken through to the immortal palace tier, and was presently a first secret elite. After he had leaped over the Dragon's Gate, he would be further improved in all aspects. In the future, it might be that he could even become an equal of the Imperial Void Celestial King. Who was the Imperial Void Celestial King? A ninth heaven Celestial King. In fact, he could possibly become a heavenly venerate in a few more epochs. Ling Han nodded and replied, "So it is, Brother Yulan. Yulan Fenghua couldn't help but ask. After we leave, why don't we have a spar? In the past, when they had entered the lost land from the ancient realm, both he and Ling Han were clearly dividing soul tears, yet he was clearly no match for the latter. This was something he could not accept, and now that he had broken through to the immortal palace tier, he thus issued a challenge to Ling Han. He was not planning to use his superior strength to bully the weak, and merely wanted Ling Han to admit that he was outmatched, satisfying his pride. Sure, Ling Han replied casually. This person had repeatedly nurtured sinister designs against him, and he could not help but want to kill him too. As for the Imperial Void Sect, with how prodigious he was, as long as he had changed his identity and showed off a bit of himself, he was confident that they would not close their doors on him. Ling Han! A soft exclamation rang out, and Enran, too, arrived elegantly, glaring angrily at Ling Han. You owe my master a great debt of gratitude, yet you actually turned her back on us. Are you even still human? Ling Han sighed softly. Toward Shang Jue, he indeed felt grateful, apologetic, and a little hateful. His feelings towards her were very conflicted. He shook his head and said, regarding Aunt Wei, there will come a day when I will make my explanations to her. Ungrateful, vile character, die. And Ran ignored him and moved directly. Boom! The Rain Emperor moved, blocking Enran's blow. You want to touch my fourth brother? You have to get through me first. Enran was surprised. Though her cultivation level had been suppressed, she was still a super monarch tier. Even an ordinary monarch tier would stumble back in retreat from this blow, but the Rain Emperor had parried hers easily. In fact, her arm was even numb from the force. Just how domineering was this? She was not to be trifled with, either. Immediately, she charged towards the Rain Emperor with a soft exclamation. Pung, pung, pung. The two of them battled fiercely. The Rain Emperor was pulling no punches in his attacks, sending Enran back in continuous retreat. There naturally were people who knew Enran here, and they couldn't help but watch in shock. Who was this incredibly domineering man? He was really too awesome. Meanwhile, Enran was completely filled with disbelief. In a battle of equals, she would actually be the one being suppressed. It should be known that even Shang Jue had said that she herself was also not much stronger than this at this stage. Then didn't this mean that the Rain Emperor was even stronger than Shang Jue in her youth? She did not believe it, and Ran's battle cry did not die out. She was determined to defeat the Rain Emperor. Ling Han looked at the Rain Emperor and looked at Enran. A strange thought suddenly popped up in his mind. Could these two become a couple? Leap over the dragon's gate. He gathered his idle thoughts. With how domineering the Rain Emperor was, he naturally had his own mind. There was no need for him to be overly concerned. The women were all eager to give it a try. Now that they had reached this place, it could be said that they had completed 90% of the journey. But as the saying went, the closer one was to completing a task, the tougher it got. If this last leap was not accomplished, then the carp would still be a carp and could not become a dragon. And the last leap was not simple, either. It was not everyone that could succeed. Their belief had to be determined. Some leaped over and turned into dragons, flying down the mountain, while some fell off the mountain, howling in pain. They naturally were smashed into bits, with no hope of reprieve. The women all had determined, resolute expressions. At this moment, their willpower was as strong as divine metal, love supporting them. They definitely could not fail. They began to leap over the dragon's gate, one after another. Ling Han's hands were clenched tightly into fists. He was concerned about all of them. First, it was Zhu Xian'er. With a leap, she crossed over the dragon's gate, and her body was immediately extended, turning into the body of a dragon, but her limbs did not change much. They merely took the form of dragon, clawed paws. Her 4 paws grasped at the clouds, and after circling once in the air, she left towards the foot of the mountain. Then it was Li Sikhan, Lu Yutong, Helian Xuanxue. Each woman passed the test successfully, and when the last woman, Xue Yanyu, also crossed over the dragon's gate successfully, Ling Han finally breathed a sigh of relief. Chang Zixin, Yan Xinlu, and the others also leaped over the dragon's gate one after another, turning into dragons that descended the mountain. "Brother Ling, I'll take my leave first," Yulan Fenghua said smilingly, striding towards the dragon's gate. His white robes fluttered gracefully, with him looking incredibly poised and confident. With a light leap, he immediately turned into a green dragon that danced through the air. "Second brother, stop fighting," Ling Han said to the Rain Emperor. "All right." The Rain Emperor was very decisive and turned around suddenly. Tossing and ran off his tail, he leaped over the dragon's gate and left. "Don't even think of leaving." And Ran was not willing to give up and set off in hot pursuit. Chapter 2191, Dragon Transformation Technique. Chapter 2191, Dragon Transformation Technique. Ling Han actually hoped that this second brother of his would gain a lover. Though the Rain Emperor had previously had a harem, when he had entered into the ancient realm, he had left behind all romantic affairs, his full being focused on cultivation. In Ling Han's eyes, this was too boring. Right, at present, they could continuously climb to the apex of cultivation. But what if the day came when there was nowhere further for them to ascend? What pleasures would there be left of life? It would be a different story if he had the company of a lover. However, the Rain Emperor was too domineering and too assertive. Would he be willing to listen to the advice of others? Ling Han sighed internally. With a bound, he leaped over the dragon's gate. Instantly, he felt a supreme force wrap around him, causing a tremendous change to take place in his form. Dragon transformation. In truth, Celestials could change their form however they liked, and it was not the slightest bit difficult for them to take the form of a dragon. However, at present, it was not something as simple as just having the form of a dragon. There were masses of dragon qi surging towards his body. The dragon qi continuously nurtured his body, pushing it towards greater strength, and even turned into multiple seals, transmitting the intent of heaven and earth. Dragon transformation technique. For some reason, these three words flashed through Ling Han's mind. There is a cultivation technique contained in this dragon qi, and it is named Dragon Transformation Technique. After successfully learning it, one would gain the ability to transform into a dragon. Of course, this dragon transformation is only a general meaning, and does not really mean that one would truly become a dragon. Instead, he would possess the strength of a dragon. By then, if everyone were like dragons, then when the force of darkness invades, we would also be able to expel them. Hiss, this time the heaven and earth has really spared no effort, actually passing on such a cultivation technique. Ling Han did not place too much importance on this dragon transformation technique. He was a cultivator of the indestructible heaven scroll, which was superior to the Tao of heaven and earth, and was the strongest and most powerful technique in this world. However, the installation of dragon qi into his body still granted him great benefits. Moreover, when the dragon transformation technique has been cultivated to the highest level, one would be able to form the qi of the immortal dragon inside his body. One streak of qi would be equivalent to a full force blow from an immortal dragon. However, the dragon qi is too hard to cultivate and would be gone once you have used it in an attack. You would have to start accumulating it from the beginning again. Additionally, the quantitative limit of dragon qi would also be restricted by the space inside the dantian. One could not possibly accumulate it continuously without end. Ordinarily, a first heaven celestial king would be able to cultivate a streak of dragon qi, and fifth heaven means 5 streaks, while ninth heaven would be 9 streaks. Ling Han read the information of the dragon transformation technique and nodded slowly. For him, the dragon transformation technique was not particularly significant, But the dragon chi that he could eventually cultivate was not too bad, as it could increase his explosive power. His body danced in the air, completely beyond his control. Dragon chi entered his body, improving Ling Han's physique in all aspects. But in truth, this improvement was not very great, because Ling Han had already cultivated every cultivation level to perfection, and the effect of the dragon chi was negligible. Instead, the 9 source powers of heaven and earth within his body became livelier, greedily absorbing this dragon chi. They were nurtured from the heaven and earth, and naturally also relied on the heaven and earth. This dragon chi only possessed the shape of a dragon, but was actually the source power of the heaven and earth, which was naturally beneficial to strengthening the source powers of heaven and earth. For the Empress and Hunyeo, the dragon chi pouring into their bodies could possibly double their strength or even triple it. But for Ling Han, it would already be good enough if it could increase his strength by 1%. However, he had already ground his battle prowess to the pinnacle of the dividing soul tier, and to say nothing of increasing his strength by 100th upon this basis. Even if it was just an increase of a 10,000th, it would still be incredibly difficult. With this comparison, it was clear how powerful the power of heaven and earth was. He descended from the skies, and when he landed on a plain, the dragon chi had also been fully absorbed. Die. An attack was already flying towards him. Ling Han looked up, and it was actually Zhang Fei. He wielded a silver spear in his hands, and at this time, every seal was already glowing brightly as he stabbed his spear towards Ling Han. Previously, Ling Han had stopped them from committing murder, and now they were going to kill Ling Han. On the other side, the Rain Emperor was already fighting with Feng Xingren and the others, but in a battle of 1 against 5, he had naturally fallen into a disadvantage. Thankfully, the Empress and Hunyeo moved in time and managed to hold 4 of them back, allowing the Rain Emperor and Feng Xingren to battle one-on-one. At this time, how terrifying the Rain Emperor was could clearly be seen. Even if he was a minor level inferior to Feng Xingren, and the latter was a great monarch tier, the former was still capable of fighting the latter to a stalemate, his battle prowess powerful to a heaven-defying extent. Chun Zixin, Fu Zhou, and Yan Xianlu were all watching in shock. No wonder the other man could become Ling Han's second brother. This battle prowess was truly astonishing. Even Enran had forgotten to attack. She only knew that the Rain Emperor was very strong, but when all their cultivation levels were suppressed, the extent of their freakishness was also shrunk down. Only now did she know that the Rain Emperor could actually be as strong as this. Ling Han's brow wrinkled in a frown, and he glanced at Zhang Fei. Then he indifferently threw out a punch. Pooh! Zhang Fei instantly exploded into a shower of blood from the impact of this punch. At first, Cheng Zixin and the others were already gaping with shock, and now they felt their scalps go numb. Zhang Fei was their equal, and was in fact even slightly stronger than them, but in front of Ling Han he exploded just from the force of a single punch. Just how wide was the gap in power between the two of them? And they actually said that they wanted to spar with Ling Han. This was practically a joke. No wonder Yi thought so highly of Ling Han. So that was the case. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, how could they possibly imagine that a heaven soul could actually be as strong as this? Yulan Fenghua's pupils also dilated in shock. This kind of heaven soul was really too terrifying, being able to insta-kill a monarch tier of the same cultivation level with a single blow. If he was honest with himself, it would definitely be impossible for him to do the same if he was sent back to heaven soul. And precisely because of this, his killing intent fell completely beyond his control. If he did not kill Ling Han now, then when the latter advanced to the Immortal Palace tier, he probably would be dying in defeat. Subconsciously, his feet were already moving. Ha 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 ha. A loud laugh rang out, and pang, a figure descended from the skies. A terrifying aura surged out, causing a chill to rise from the depths of everyone's hearts. Ling Han's eyes swept over this newcomer, and his pupils involuntarily dilated. Ji Wuming. There was no longer any restriction of cultivation level here. Ji Wuming spread out his aura without any reservations. He was clearly only a heaven soul, yet was even more domineering than any celestial king. Ji Wuming's expression was filled with evil. His eyes swept over the gathered masses. Not bad, not bad. There is also a large amount of source power of heaven and earth on you. It would be a waste on you people, so you should just contribute it to me. He moved aggressively, paying no concern to who his opponent was, and just simply killed a man, then feeding on him forcefully. In this manner, he had naturally become a public enemy. Murder, feeding on the corpse. What was this? Let's work together and destroy him, someone called out loudly, encouraging others to join forces. Meanwhile, some had turned and fled. Even if they won this kind of battle, what would be the point? There was not the slightest benefit to be gained. Ling Han also moved in a hurry, drawing all the women into the Black Tower. Faced with Ji Wuming, he was only certain that he could stand against him, but did not think that he would be able to protect the women at the same time. It was the same the other way round. Ji Wuming, too, could not possibly protect the lives or life of someone while he was barraged by Ling Han's offensive. Ji Wuming moved like lightning. With a tremble of his figure, 9 divided souls surged from his body and began a massacre. As expected, he, too, had formed 9 divided souls. The present Ji Wuming's cultivation level was comparable to First Secret Immortal Palace tier, and his battle prowess had surged directly to peak stage 4th Secret, which was incredibly terrifying. Run, 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 everyone run. After Ling Han drew the women into the Black Tower, he had no other worries. Thus he turned and ran towards Ji Wuming, wanting to stop his random slaughter. However, he had just moved when he felt a force directed at the back of his head. The person who had made this move was Yulan Fenghua. Chapter 2192, Celestial Killer Spear. Chapter 2192, Celestial Killer Spear. Ling Han involuntarily humphed. This Yulan Fenghua was really very petty to actually make a move on him at this time, and it was a sneak attack at that. How despicable. Without even turning his head, he greeted the incoming blow with a punch of his own. Boom! A frightening light burst out, as if the heavens were collapsing. Yulan Fenghua paled in shock. Ling Han had actually dissipated his strike. He was but a mere heaven soul. How could he possibly be so strong? Yulan Fenghua looked at Ji Wuming again. This madman was also killing First Secret, Second Secret, and Third Secret elites like he was chopping vegetables. She was the same kind of freak as Ling Han. How could there be such freaks in this world? And to have 2 of them pop up at the same time. Brother Yulan, this is your so-called spar? Ling Han asked calmly. This was completely a sneak attack. Yulan Fenghua looked embarrassed. At first, he had planned to kill Ling Han with a single blow, ending all his future worries. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually be so freakish? He was clearly only a heaven soul, yet his battle prowess could match that of Yulan Fenghua, who was a First Secret monarch tier. And now, with Ling Han mocking him directly, he was naturally extremely displeased, and wanted nothing more than to kick Ling Han to the other side of the world so that he could then escape from this awkward situation. He hardened his heart. In this present situation, it was worse the more he spoke. He might as well just remain silent. Ji Wuming was committing mass slaughter and appeared to be planning to massacre all of them, and he only had to kill Ling Han. Then, all his actions today would naturally be known to no one. Ling Han, you should die now. He charged out again. In his eyes, though Ling Han was very freakish, he was still just a heaven soul no matter how freakish he was, and he himself was a First Secret monarch tier. As long as he went all out, it would definitely be him winning. Laws have no bounds. He channeled a powerful attack, its might soaring to the heavens. He was the holy son of the Imperial Void sect, and was the personal disciple of the Imperial Void Celestial King at that. Not only did he have a grasp of many celestial techniques, their might was also incredibly strong. This laws have no bounds was a secret technique that he could only use after advancing to the Immortal Palace tier, and was endlessly strong. Boom! It was as if he had become the ruler of the heavens. His palm descended, capable of piercing through the heavens, directly striking onto the underworld. This attack was quite strong, Ling Han thought internally, yet was completely unafraid. Using fists of fury, he launched his own attack at that massive palm. Pum! The fist blasted onto that colossal palm, and did not even pause before directly penetrating the palm and striking out. The power of regulation vibrated, instantly covering the entire palm. Then this gargantuan palm collapsed and crumbled. Ling Han's fist was aimed straight for Yulan Fenghua. Yulan Fenghua quickly leaped up, dodging this blow, his expression filled with absolute disbelief. He had shot out a powerful attack, and not only had he not managed to suppress Ling Han, it had instead been destroyed with a single punch from the latter. He was just a mere heaven soul, and was actually even stronger than Yulan Fenghua, who was a first secret monarch tier. How was this possible? Though his heart was astounded, he still summoned a battle spear without hesitation. With a wave of his hands, wung, 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 multiple seals on the battle spear lit up, exuding a terrifying aura. He declared arrogantly, "This is the weapon my master used in the Immortal Palace tier. Though it is not a celestial tool, it has been instilled with my master's invincible fighting spirit. This spear's name is Celestial Killer." Celestial Killer? How arrogant! The strongest in the celestial realm were celestials, but the Imperial Void Celestial King actually named this spear as Celestial Killer? Just what kind of lofty ambition was that? Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Unfortunately, your master is your master, and you are you. There is no way the two of you can be talked about in the same breath." "Nonsense! I will definitely be the second coming of my master in future," Yulan Fenghua declared loudly. "You won't be." Ling Han shook his head. "You haven't even cultivated dividing 9 souls, dividing soul tier to perfection, and are merely mediocre." Small Tower's assessment of the Imperial Void Celestial King was that the latter was qualified to ascend to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Then this person had to have formed 9 divided souls. Yulan Fenghua had not formed 9 divided souls, and wanted to become the second Imperial Void Celestial King. Wasn't that just being delusional? "After your death, I will carve the word mediocre onto your grave." Yulan Fenghua charged out, wielding his spear. The tip of the spear was flowing with endless, sharp violence. It was clearly no celestial tool, yet seemed to be even more powerful than any celestial tool. This was because there was no Immortal Palace tier that could fully activate the full might of a celestial tool. On the contrary, the might of 5 stars and 6 stars pseudo-celestial tools could be fully released in the hands of an Immortal Palace tier. It was just how techniques did not differ in strength. The strongest technique would be the one that was suited to one. Boom! The piercing attack shot forwards, its vicious might soaring to the heavens. This was not just the combined force of Yulan Fenghua and the Celestial Killer Spear. It also included the invincible intent that the Imperial Void Celestial King had previously left behind in the Celestial Killer Spear. He had a chance of becoming a Heavenly Venerate, so what did that signify? At that time, the Imperial Void Celestial King had to be a prodigy of the same strength as Ling Han and Ji Wuming, or perhaps even slightly stronger than them. It was rumored that he had cultivated the severing mundane tier to the point that he could deliver no further strikes, and only then did he advance into the dividing soul tier. Which also meant that even though Yulan Fenghua had only pierced forwards with a spear, it was equivalent to the full force blow of Yulan Fenghua, the Imperial Void Celestial King, and a 6-star pseudo-celestial tool all combined. Ling Han looked intrigued. Of course, his interest was not directed at Yulan Fenghua, but rather at the Imperial Void Celestial King. To be exact, it was towards the Imperial Void Celestial King when he had still been in the Immortal Palace tier. Ling Han wanted to battle the Imperial Void Celestial King in this proxy manner. Raising his fist, he charged towards the Celestial Killer Spear in attack. Pooh! A stream of blood gushed out, and Ling Han's fist was immediately dripping with blood. Ha ha ha! With your mere body of flesh and blood, you actually dare to stand against the Celestial Killer Spear. You are merely asking for your own suffering. Yulan Fenghua smirked coldly. Meanwhile, Ling Han looked at his fist. The source power of wood activated, and the wound immediately recovered at a visibly fast rate. Though this still contained the martial intent of the Imperial Void Celestial King, as well as the destructive power of a 6-star pseudo-celestial tool, the source power of wood was at the Celestial King tier. It was naturally easy for it to dissipate these factors. It was now very hard for his physique to further improve in strength. He would need an ocean's worth of natural treasures working together with the indestructible Heaven Scroll to be able to improve his physique further. Imperial Void Celestial King truly lives up to his reputation. Ling Han nodded, showing a solemn expression. Though he had only glimpsed the tip of the iceberg, the Imperial Void Celestial King definitely had to be world-shakingly powerful when he had been in the Immortal Palace tier to be able to just have a sliver of vicious intent explode and cause even Ling Han's physique to be outmatched. After all, Ling Han presently was only equivalent to First Secret and had not really advanced into the Immortal Palace tier yet. Yulan Fenghua was furious. Ling Han actually overlooked him completely, and the more he praised the Imperial Void Celestial King as extraordinary, the further he looked down on him. The might of my master naturally shakes the whole world. So how could you possibly look up to him? Yulan Fenghua declared arrogantly, You will become the dust of history soon. Ling Han chuckled and replied, If it had been the Imperial Void Celestial King from that time, I would definitely have battled him gladly. Too bad, you are too weak, so you are not even qualified to incite my fighting spirit. Only this spear is worthy of my interest in playing with it. You! Yulan Fenghua trembled with fury. He was a super monarch tier, and it had always been him calling the shots and looking down on all the other prodigies of the world. Yet now he was actually treated with such utter contempt. Only the spear in his hands was worthy of Ling Han's interest to play around. You can just continue to speak tough, but you will very soon regret and find out just how terrifying I can be in my fury. He calmed down and practically spat out each word, his killing intent boiling over. Ling Han cracked a smile. Oh, scowling. Die. Yulan Fenghua could no longer bear it. With a battle cry, his figure charged out the Celestial Killer's spear, sweeping out in attack, its murderous aura surging to the heavens. Chapter 2193. Joining forces again. Chapter 2193. Joining forces again. Yulan Fenghua was indeed very strong. A super monarch tier was not just a mere empty boast, and he was also acclaimed as the second coming of the Imperial Void Celestial King. This assessment was extremely high. The Celestial Killer Spear was even more terrifying, and was the pseudo-celestial tool that the Imperial Void Celestial King had previously used, instilled with his invincible fighting spirit and will. Even just a sliver would shake the heavens and quake the earth. More importantly, the Celestial Killer Spear was a 6-star pseudo-celestial tool and could match any 5th Secret Elite or even Monarch tier. This was terrifying. Ling Han was indeed very freakish, but he had not reached the extent at which he could stand against a 5th Secret Monarch tier. Thus, under the powerful offensive of the Celestial Killer Spear, he was forced into continuous retreat, and there would occasionally be blood spraying out. If it were not for the fact that his physique and recovery ability were both freakish, he would have long since been killed by the Celestial Killer Spear. Yulan Fenghua laughed loudly. He had finally pushed his enemy into such a sorry state, which made him feel incredibly satisfied and pleased. "This spear is not too bad." A compliment rang out, and Ji Wuming leaped over, his eyes focused on the celestial killer spear in a burning gaze. He was clearly just a heaven soul, but Yulan Fenghua still felt a powerful chill. It was like the other man was not a weakling that was inferior to him by a major tier, but rather a high and noble celestial king that was capable of even being his master's equal. He hurriedly shook his head and expelled this chill from his body. "What does it have to do with you?" He withdrew his spear for the moment. "I'd like to study it for a bit," Ji Wuming said smilingly. Just as he was speaking, his 9 divided souls had killed just about everyone in the vicinity and returned to him. Boom! His aura immediately rose to a new level, and even Yulan Fenghua felt an involuntary urge to kneel in worship. The strongest state of the dividing soul tier would definitely be when all the divided souls had returned into their body, and the individual battle prowess would reach the strongest level. However, against multiple enemies, having divided souls split out would achieve a better result. Having felt the pressure of the celestial killer spear, even Ji Wuming had withdrawn all his 9 divided souls, which showed that he was quite wary of this pseudo-celestial tool. "In your dreams," Yulan Fenghua smirked coldly. What was going on with this world? A mere dividing soul tier actually dared to provoke an immortal palace tier, and a first secret monarch tier at that. Yet there were as many as 2 such people who did not know what was good for them, and actually did have this kind of strength. Ji Wuming looked towards Ling Han, his gaze holding a killing intent that could not be concealed, and asked, "Ling Han, why don't we join forces again? You want the spear?" Ling Han asked, "You already have the precious treasure of a heavenly venerate, and this spear is completely useless to you. As for me, I just want to study it. After all, the Imperial Void is that old guy's disciple," Ji Wuming said. "All right." Ling Han nodded. Indeed, he only wanted to battle with the Celestial King tier while within the Celestial Killer Spear, but did not covet this previous tool all that much. Yulan Fenghua was both furious and shocked. These 2 people actually dared to covet the Celestial Killer Spear, and were completely overlooking him. However, hearing the tone of these 2 people, it seemed as if they both knew the existence of the Heavenly Venerable tier. It should be known that even he had just found out that there was such a supreme level in the celestial realm not too long ago, and had even been granted an audience with the sealed emotion, Heavenly Venerable, wherein the latter had carelessly given him some guidance, and it was enough to completely transform him and increase his battle prowess 3 times over. Yet now, a heavenly venerate from Ji Wuming's mouth was actually called an old guy, and Ling Han now even possessed the precious treasure of a heavenly venerable tier. Hiss, just what was going on with these 2 people? True, if it was not related to heavenly venerable tier, how could such a ridiculous occurrence like dividing soul tier being capable of standing against immortal palace tier happen? I understand now, that is dividing 9 souls. Yulan Fenghua suddenly exclaimed. He previously had thought that Ji Wuming had only been using a cultivation technique, manifesting 9 doppelgangers, and had not even considered the idea of dividing 9 souls. It was only now that his heart suddenly trembled wildly as he thought of this possibility. That was because there was also one such freak in the sealed emotion palace. He clearly had been cultivating for a shorter period of time than him, yet even he could only kneel down in submission. In front of such a freak, he was as insignificant as an ant. And now, this kind of feeling had come back to him again. Fortunately, the freak in the sealed emotion palace had a higher cultivation level than him, so he did not even have the slightest extravagant hopes. But these 2 people in front of him were both inferior to him by a whole major tier, and he also possessed a deadly weapon like the celestial killer spear in his hands, so he had enough confidence that he could face these 2 freaks. Hold on, Ling Han must also have cultivated to the dividing 9 souls. He was overcome with jealousy because Ling Han previously had clearly been inferior to him. Yet now the latter had completely left him behind in the dust, and this was completely displeasing to him. "Let's make our move," Ji Wuming said to Ling Han. If it were not due to the celestial killer spear, he would have been able to easily kill a garbage like Yulan Fenghua. Ling Han nodded, since Yulan Fenghua now knew that he possessed the precious treasure of a heavenly venerate, and the latter also had an extremely strong link with the sealed emotion, heavenly venerable. It was naturally impossible that he could allow him to leave this place alive. The two of them had joined forces before. Though they were opposed to one another, their level of coordination was extremely high. Xiao! Xiao! The two of them moved from the left and right side, respectively, charging towards Yulan Fenghua. Boom! A boundless brilliance surged from their hands, descending downwards on Yulan Fenghua. Scram! Yulan Fenghua shouted loudly, waving his spear in a wide sweep and exuding impressive might. The celestial killer spear was too powerful. In the past, the Imperial Void Celestial King had to also have cultivated up to dividing 9 souls, and this was a pseudo-celestial tool that he had tempered to the level of the 5th secret. Just how terrifying was this powerful weapon? Thus, even if Ling Han and Ji Wuming had joined forces, so what? They would definitely be suppressed by Yulan Fenghua and left at a complete disadvantage. Yet, Yulan Fenghua did not bear the slightest bit of pride in his expression. If their cultivation levels were all equal, and he could suppress 2 super freaks, it would be proof that his strength was more powerful. But now, the present situation was that Ling Han's and Ji Wuming's cultivation level was inferior to his, and he just gained the upper hand by depending on the celestial killer spear. If they all did not depend on their celestial tools, then he would not even be a match for Ling Han or Ji Wuming individually. This caused his expression to become livid, and the killing intent in his heart surged endlessly. If that was the case, he would then kill both of these freaks, and then there would be no need for him to suffer such embarrassment. Die! The celestial killer spear danced wildly. Yulan Fenghua was like a god of war, completely enjoying the upper hand. Heaven souls would ultimately only be heaven souls, he declared disdainfully. Ling Han humphed and finally released a powerful move. The great clash of source powers channeled, and boom, he shot out a shock wave forwards. Endless seals flickered, filled with destruction. Wang, the celestial killer spear shone, and formed a shield of light in front of Yulan Fenghua, protecting him completely. However, the power of the great clash of source powers was too overwhelming. Even if Yulan Fenghua was protected by the celestial killer spear, he was still sent sliding back about 500 meters before he finally stopped, leaving behind 2 deep tracks of footprints on the ground. Ha 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 ha. When the shield of light dispersed, Yulan Fenghua burst into laughter. This strike from Ling Han caused a chill to rise up from his very soul. But the celestial killer spear truly lived up to being the pseudo-celestial tool that the Imperial Void Celestial King had used years ago. It was capable of both defense and offense, and showed the brilliance of the pinnacle limits of the immortal palace tier in both aspects. "You are both but clay chickens and pottery dogs," he declared in an act of disdain, but in truth he was greatly jealous. Ji Wuming's figure flashed, and he already charged right in front of Yulan Fenghua. Character appeared on his forehead, turning into an eye that snapped open abruptly. Immediately, lotus flowers bloomed all around him. He tapped out a finger, and it was like the finger tap of a Buddha, transcending all mortality. Eternity tap! Yulan Fenghua suddenly exclaimed in shock. Clay chickens and pottery dogs is a Chinese proverb that means someone is absolutely useless. Chapter 2194, Buddha's Son? Chapter 2194, Buddha's Son. Yulan Fenghua was extremely astounded. The Eternity Tap was the ultimate technique of the Buddhist sect. The Buddhist sect was a colossal force, and the founder of the sect, the Nine Lights Ancient Buddha, had long since disappeared without a trace. It was said that he had died, but his 3 disciples were still supporting the banner of the Buddhist sect. The three of them were all known as Buddha Kings, and two of the Buddha Kings had reached the height of the ninth heaven celestial king, and the last was an eighth heaven celestial king, who was said to also have hopes of advancing into the ninth heaven. Even the Imperial Void sect would have to give some face to this kind of great sect. Yulan Fenghua had also previously exchanged blows with a Buddha son of the present generation. The latter's amazing techniques were like a deluge of heavenly flowers, causing him to gasp in amazement and think that this was an extraordinary genius that was withdrawn from worldly affairs, and could even compare with that freak from the Sealed Emotion Palace. And what stunned him the most at that time was the Eternity Tap move that the Buddha son, Shurchanzi, had used. This tap made him know what gap lay between the two of them, and had been branded in his mind since. Every time he thought about it, he would shudder with fear. The Eternity Tap was the true core secret technique of the Buddhist sect. The might executed would be different depending on the user's cultivation level. One would have to comprehend the Buddha heart to be able to use it. Legend had it that the Nine Lights ancient Buddha had once used the Eternity Tap to kill a ninth heaven celestial king. Yet now, this secret technique that would not be taught to outsiders was actually seen being used by Ji Wuming. Could it be that the latter was an heir of the Buddhist sect? Impossible. The moment one joined the Buddhist sect, all their hair would be removed. They were all bald, and there was not one that was like Ji Wuming now. Boom! When this finger tapped towards him, the 6 samsara realms all opened, evolving into the 6 samsara realms of reincarnation. Yulan Fenghua was even more astounded. That was because while Ji Wuming's present cultivation level was inferior to that of Shurchanzi, but merely in terms of the level of mastery of Eternity Tap, it was actually Ji Wuming that was superior. How was this possible? Boom! It was still the Celestial Killer Spear that showed its might, sending out a frightening attack that cancelled out the Eternity Tap. So what if you are a Buddha son? Yulan Fenghua laughed, after faltering for a moment. The Eternity Tap was a great shadow in his heart, but now this tap was completely useless in front of him, which gave him a great feeling of satisfaction all of a sudden. The two of you, I will send you to the afterlife today. Ling Han shook his head. Ji Wuming, if there was a list for those I'm the most unwilling to die together with, you would definitely be ranked on top of my list. Yet Ji Wuming thought seriously for a moment, and finally said, You can only be ranked 5th on mine. There may come a day when we would die, but it would definitely not be today, and furthermore, definitely not in the hands of trash like you, Ling Han said to Yulan Fenghua, his expression filled with disdain. Death is already at your doorstep, and you are still talking tough? Yulan Fenghua was extremely furious. Brandishing the Celestial Killer Spear, he sent out an incredibly terrifying strike. At the same time, he was also rousing the Celestial Killer Spear, preparing to unleash a powerful attack that was harsh beyond compare. Both Ling Han and Ji Wuming moved as fast as lightning, dodging the attack of the Celestial Killer Spear on one side, while also unleashing a counterattack so that they could speed up the exhaustion of the energy within the Celestial Killer Spear. When cultivators had completely worn themselves out in battle, they could ingest alchemical pills to recover their origin power, but there was no way a pseudo-celestial tool could do the same. Thus, Ling Han and Ji Wuming's strategy was to expend the energy inside the Celestial Killer Spear. As long as it was fully expended, then the Celestial Killer Spear would only be a weapon that had been forged from 6 stars pseudo-divine metal. This was a stupid method, but it could not be helped. Who asked the Celestial Killer Spear's level to be too high? Thankfully, it was the two of them. If it was any other Heaven Solto, say nothing of Heaven Soul, even if it was a 4th secret or 5th secret elite, they would only be kneeling immediately in the face of the Celestial Killer Spear. Not only were Ling Han and Ji Wuming capable of contending with it, they could even possibly win. What else could be asked of them? Yulan Fenghua naturally knew this as well. That was why he had begun his preparation for unleashing a powerful move, planning to take down both Ling Han and Ji Wuming in a single strike. World destruction. He had already accumulated enough power, and suddenly stabbed the celestial killer's spear strongly into the ground. Boom! A golden light spread out, extending continuously in all directions, and wherever the golden light passed, the ground would immediately be turned into metal, reflecting a dazzling brilliance. A chill immediately rose up in Ling Han. He felt that if he was touched by this golden light, then his body would instantly turn into metal. However, the source power of metal in his body was exuding a strong intent, seemingly filled with longing for this energy. Thinking so, he dismissed the idea of entering into the Black Tower. The golden light swept past, and he was instantly turned into a golden statue, standing erect on the golden ground. On the other side, the character once again appeared on Ji Wuming's forehead, and his body was also shining brilliantly, as if the attack delivered by the celestial killer spear had engulfed him ahead of time. The golden light rippled over 50 kilometers before finally stopping, and everything within this diameter had been turned golden, becoming a world of metal. Yulan Fenghua pulled out the celestial killer spear, suddenly laughing loudly. He had destroyed 2 powerful enemies in a single stroke, causing every pore on his body to open up, feeling extremely gratified and pleased. However, his smile very soon disappeared. The metallic aspect of Ling Han's body was gradually retreating at a very fast pace, and Ji Wuming was even more astonishing. He directly walked out in that metallic body as if he was a golden Buddha. Fuck! Yulan Fenghua was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of his head. He had unleashed a powerful move, but this was the result. The 2 of them, were they really human? Ling Han laughed. This move is very comfortable, so just do it again. He was not the one feeling the comfort, but rather the source power of metal, which had swallowed the regulations of metal that had been shot out by the celestial killer spear to nurture itself. Again, Yulan Fenghua shook his head internally, to say nothing of the fact that it was useless against Ji Wuming and Ling Han, and unleashing a second world destruction was equivalent to wasting energy. It was also impossible for him to do it again. That was because the celestial killer spear could only unleash the world destruction once in a short period of time. The seals on the spear that had been activated with much difficulty had all dimmed, and now there were only a rare few that were still glowing, its might greatly reduced. Humph! Ji Wuming stepped out of the state of Golden Buddha he was in, but his aura was not weakened in the slightest. Instead, it had become even more terrifying, with demonic qi surging to the heavens. It was as if he had suddenly turned from a great Buddha that would save the world into a demon master that was intent on destroying the world. He charged towards Yulan Fenghua, sending out a palm strike, fierce flames billowing. Ling Han was not reserved either. He primarily used the fists of fury, and would occasionally use the great clash of source powers. As for the divine demon sword, he did not summon it. This was still only a 4 stars pseudo-celestial tool. If it clashed forcefully with the celestial killer spear, it would only be broken. Yulan Fenghua's heart became colder and colder. Aside from having astonishing battle prowess, both Ji Wuming and Ling Han also had frighteningly strong defenses, even if he was completely enjoying the upper hand. So what? There was no way that he could turn his upper hand into a victory. Gritting his teeth, he suddenly twisted the spear, planning to cut out a path of blood. Inescapable net! With a wave of his right hand, Ji Wuming tossed out a large net that moved to enshroud Ji Wuming. Yulan Fenghua humphed, and wielded his spear to pierce the gigantic net. In his eyes, this large net would naturally immediately collapse with a strike of the celestial killer spear, but the truth was completely contrary to his expectations. This piercing attack only caused the large net to slightly open a bit, but it did not break, possessing incredible elasticity and sturdiness. Yulan Fenghua was involuntarily dumbstruck. This was the celestial killer spear, and it actually could not pierce open this large net. Meanwhile, Ji Wuming turned his head and smiled at Ling Han. I had initially prepared this for you. Fuck. Samsara in Buddhism refers to the beginningless cycle of repeated birth, mundane existence, and dying again. Chapter 2195, Divine Sense of a Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2195, Divine Sense of a Heavenly Venerate. Ji Wuming had always wanted to kill Ling Han and snatch the precious treasure of the Heavenly Venerate from him. He was definitely an anti-hero. If he wanted something, he would express that want frankly and would not deliberately put on any pretenses. That was the style of a vile character. The reason he had prepared this so-called net was actually Ling Han. Once he was captured by the net, he would be just like Yulan Fenghua, who was yet unable to pierce through the net even with the celestial killer spear. Unfortunately, this net is only a one-use item. Ji Wuming shook his head in mild regret. Ling Han wanted to give him the middle finger, but these words were not completely trustworthy. God knew if Ji Wuming was simply lying to him and luring him into carelessness. This person was an anti-hero. To achieve his motives, he could be unscrupulous. After sacrificing such a treasure, if I am still unable to take this spear, wouldn't my losses be too great? Ji Wuming charged out, continuing to barrage Yulan Fenghua with a powerful offensive. Yulan Fenghua had the protection of the celestial killer spear, and there was absolutely no risk to his life, but there was no way for him to escape either. That net seemed to have been pinned down. No matter how Yulan Fenghua charged, he ultimately would still be bounced backwards by the elastic ropes of the net. This was truly a treasure. Ling Han watched with a heated gaze. If he had such a treasure, it would become extremely easy for him to snatch any kind of treasure in the future. Too bad, this treasure was ultimately only for a single use. Furthermore, with Ji Wuming's strength, the chances of snatching a treasure from his hands were practically zero. This was the same as how Ji Wuming had his eye on the Black Tower, and wanted to take it for himself, but had failed repeatedly. Their levels were already incredibly close. Either of them could possibly kill the other. Yulan Fenghua roared furiously. What use was it even if he had powerful battle prowess? The celestial killer spear could not tear through this net, and all of it was pointless. This was a very hopeless affair. It was clear that he had superior strength, yet he could only submissively wait for death like this. Ling Han also charged over, joining forces with Ji Wuming, and speeding up the exhaustion of energy inside the celestial killer spear. Just as it looked like all the seals on the celestial killer spear were about to go dim, Yulan Fenghua's expression twisted completely, and he roared in fury. Since the two of you are so determined to seek death, let us die together then. He spat out strange syllables from his mouth, and the meaning could not be distinguished when they were spoken together. However, the heaven and earth suddenly changed. Dark clouds rolled out and lightning flashed. Oh no, this trash is reciting the true name of the sealed emotion, Heavenly Venerable. With his cultivation level, there is no way he could sustain the descent of a sliver of thought from a Heavenly Venerate. But we would be exposed to the eyes of that old guy, Ji Wuming said solemnly. A fierce expression appeared on his face. He truly deserves death. He is just trash, and will actually cause me to waste one of my trump cards. His fingers moved in hand seals. One, a golden Buddha, suddenly appeared behind him, which was followed by the second, the third, and so on. In total, 9 of them appeared and surrounded Yulan Fenghua completely. The 9 golden Buddhas chanted Buddhist scriptures at the same time, surpassing all. With their chanting, Yulan Fenghua's voice was abruptly drowned out. It was not that the sound was too loud, completely overwhelming his voice, but rather was a suppression in terms of regulations. Wah! Yulan Fenghua threw up copious amounts of blood. Even if he had not completely recited the true name of a Heavenly Venerate, a sliver of intent was already mysteriously descending. This was something that his body could not possibly sustain. He looked dumbly forwards as his body began to crumble, suddenly turning into thousands of pieces. Kwang! Thunder rang out loudly in the skies, and a rip suddenly opened in the void. An eye appeared, but it had not managed to sweep its vision doorwards when it was struck by lightning. Pah! It directly vanished, and the rip in the void was instantly restored. The dark clouds dispersed, turning back into clear skies. Ji Wuming's expression was slightly pale. Using a powerful move to stop the descent of a sliver of intent of a heavenly venerate had been only a piece of cake for him in the past. Yet now it caused him to pay quite an exorbitant price. The heavenly venerable tier has surpassed the heaven and earth, and is no longer recognized by the heaven and earth. He cannot easily show up. Ji Wuming actually explained the situation to Ling Han. It was rare that this ninth heaven celestial king of the past was willing to reveal some secrets. So Ling Han naturally grabbed the opportunity and asked, "Isn't it said that the heavenly venerable tier has surpassed the heaven and earth? Even if the heavenly venerable tier is not recognized by the heaven and earth, so what?" Ji Wuming shook his head. The heavenly venerable tier has only surpassed regulations, and not the heaven and earth. Ling Han was slightly confused. Weren't the heaven and earth and regulations the same concept? Wrong. Ji Wuming shook his head. How could anyone be capable of conquering and surpassing the might of the heaven and earth? But as the heaven and earth channels, there is a need for some regulations to serve the heaven and earth. The regulations of heaven and earth can be altered, but the heaven and earth itself cannot. It would either exist or cease to exist. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, "Can we use this metaphor then? The heaven and earth are father and mother, while the regulations are the child. We cultivators are grandchildren, so we have to adhere to the regulations. But in the case of heavenly venerable tier, they are equivalent to the illegitimate children of heaven and earth, and thus are equal to the regulations. Yet they are envied by the regulations and granted no recognition from the regulations." Ji Wuming chuckled. This metaphor is really a mess, but there is some logic to it. However, the regulations is birthed from the heaven and earth. A heavenly venerable tier has surpassed the regulations, and is similarly not recognized by the heaven and earth. However, the heaven and earth cannot directly interfere, and can only act through regulations. That is why even regulations can do nothing against heavenly venerable tier. Going by your previous metaphor, the heavenly venerable tier should be considered as an unfilial child that has been cast out of the family and can rule as a despot, yet ultimately it is still a member of this family. As he spoke, he stowed the celestial killer spear away. After paying such a heavy price, he had to have some profit. Ling Han did not stop him. Indeed, he did not have much interest in the celestial killer spear, and Ji Wuming had sacrificed more than he had. More importantly, Ling Han also hoped that Ji Wuming could become stronger. The stronger he was, the more it could motivate him so that he would not slack off or relax. If there came a day when he suddenly had no rival, he would definitely be extremely bored and have no further desire to improve his cultivation level. That was because no matter how strong he became, so what? He would already be at the top. Ling Han, when I have digested these source power of heaven and earth, I will battle you again. Ji Wuming laughed loudly. Your life ultimately has to end in my hands. Ling Han only offered him a cold laugh. If he wanted a battle, he was pleased to oblige. What did he have to fear? Ji Wuming shot through the air, and very soon disappeared from sight. With so many people dying, powerful figures would be arriving shortly. If he did not leave, it would be too late, though. He was sure to have some means of fleeing from ascending origin tiers, or even celestial kings. He ultimately would still have to make some sacrifices. What was the point of being stubborn now? Ling Han turned his head and looked over. The Rain Emperor Hunyao and the others were still battling Zhan Fei, Feng Xingren, and their group fiercely. The Empress and Hunyao had tied up 5 of them, merely staying on the defensive, and allowing the Rain Emperor to battle his opponent without reservations. The Rain Emperor was a cultivation prodigy. He had actually completely exhausted the benefits he had gained from his dragon transformation in battle, gradually increasing his battle prowess and reaching a level that completely surpassed his opponent. Then his viciousness came out in full play. In a few strikes, he beat his opponent into dust. Ling Han leaped over and said, "Second brother, I'll help you deal with a few of them. It would not be good to stay here too long." "All right." The Rain Emperor was not the kind to show off. Him dealing with one opponent independently was already proof of his strength. There was no need for him to continue to duel the others. Retreat, retreat, retreat. Zhang Fei and his group were all pale and hurriedly called out for a retreat. Ling Han stretched out a hand. Boom! Regulations turned into a cage, imprisoning all 5 of them. Though I do not possess the inescapable net, I am still more than adequate to detain all of you here. Chapter 2196 6. Saintly Origin Academy. Chapter 2196 Saintly Origin Academy. Ling Han moved. This was the suppression of the Immortal Palace tier against Dividing Soul tier. How could Zhang Fei and his group possibly be a match? In just an instant, all 5 of them were killed. They didn't even get the chance to use their trump cards. "Let's go!" Ling Han grabbed everyone. His figure flashed using the void space and very quickly disappeared from sight. Only a few minutes after they had left did Ascending Origin tier elites come belatedly. They could only look at the blood pooled all over the ground, as well as the spiritual pieces that had not yet dissipated, screaming and unwilling to return to the heaven and earth. However, this was destined to be wasted effort. Without a physical body, whole spirits could not linger for too long, what more when they were just pieces. After Ling Han traveled for a very long while, he finally let everyone down, including Yan Xianlu and the others. Ji Wuming had given him some face, and had not made a move on those close to him. Perhaps he, too, knew that if he'd made a move on these people, Ling Han would definitely have moved to stop him, and the both of them would have been embroiled in a fierce battle ahead of time. In that case, Ji Wuming naturally would not have been able to hunt down others. "Brother Ling, do you have any plans of returning to the Eastern Celestial Realm after this?" Yan Xianlu and the other prodigies from the Eastern Celestial Realm all asked. Ling Han shook his head. He was going to change his appearance after this and enter into the Imperial Void Sect. His ultimate goal was the Sealed Emotion Palace. Hence, he naturally could not return to the Eastern Celestial Realm. "Ling Han, we will wait for your return. The Alliance cannot lack a leader, naturally," Chang Zixin said. By now, he was completely impressed with Ling Han. "That's right." Fu Zhou nodded as well. Ling Han thought for a moment. "I will find the time to make a trip back to the Eastern Celestial Realm. Before this, I will leave the matter of the Alliance to you guys. I hope that you all, together with Yi, can improve your cultivation levels as soon as possible, because there is not much time left for us." He was not a selfish person. By then, he would let everyone into the Black Tower and enjoy the 100,000-fold time acceleration effects. Faced with the survival of the heaven and earth, all else could be set aside first. Yan Xianlu and the others agreed and then left. They could not stay for too long. After all, they still needed celestial kings to take them back, and how could they make a celestial king wait for too long? "Second brother, are you returning to the great majestic sect?" Ling Han asked. "I'm fine with either. In any case, I am roaming around in my travels all for the sake of becoming stronger," the Rain Emperor said very carelessly. Ling Han nodded. The 2 brothers had finally reunited after over 10,000 years spent apart. He did not want to immediately separate with the second brother either. No matter what, they had to stay together for a while longer. "Fourth brother, what are your plans?" the Rain Emperor asked him instead. Ling Han naturally would not be hiding anything from the Rain Emperor, and spoke of how he was going to enter into the Imperial Void Sect. Then second brother will go with you, the Rain Emperor replied. He, too, was extremely curious about heavenly venerable Tyr, and saw it as a tall mountain that he wished to conquer. Right at this moment, multiple streaks of celestial light suddenly flashed in the skies, which then led to the appearance of a decree. It was entwined by 9 streaks of celestial light, and then characters flashed out one after another. A boundless might spread out, as if it was the arrival of a celestial king, looking down on the mass of common people. A celestial king Tyr, decree one that was written by a 9th heaven celestial king at that. Could it be that because Ji Wuming had committed mass slaughter, it had enraged a 9th heaven celestial king, and thus they'd written this decree as a warrant of arrest for him? At this time, those characters stopped moving and turned into words. The calamity will soon arrive, and great changes will occur. To ignite the sparks of our celestial realm, the residual green flames celestial king, together with 21 9th heaven celestial kings, will establish the Saintly Origin Academy, nurturing exceptional prodigies to resist the storm of darkness that would be coming soon. Any who think themselves as having superior natural talent may advance to the Twin Horses heavenly realm, Lishui City, where there will be someone in charge of selections. These words stayed for about an hour's time, and then the 9 streaks of colored light dispersed, completely disappearing without a trace. Instantly, the entire celestial realm was in an uproar. Right. This decree did not just appear above of Ling Han and his group, but rather in every corner of the celestial realm. Every single person of the eastern and western celestial realms could see Eidavin if they were blind. This was regulations, and would directly enter into their mind's eye. No one doubted the authenticity of this decree, because the 9 streaks of celestial light were a symbol unique to 9th heaven celestial kings. And to say that any 9th heaven celestial king would be bored to the point of using this as a prank, even if they fell for this deception, they should be feeling honored. Ling Han and his group exchanged looks, a strong feeling of unease rising up in them. First, it was the heaven and earth that had broken their own rules, allowing the Dragon's Gate mountain to appear ahead of time, and next a considerable number of 9th heaven celestial kings had established an academy together, gathering the exceptional prodigies of the world, intent on standing against the storm of darkness. It should be known that before this, there were practically few that knew of the existence of the foreign realm, and that they were attempting to invade the celestial realm and occupy this heaven and earth for their own. Though the decree had not clearly explained the origins of the storm of darkness, it had pointed out that the celestial realm was presently facing a great crisis. What could this mean? The time that the foreign realm invades us may be far sooner than we have expected. Ling Han pondered deeply. An unexpected change must have taken place in the 2-realm passageway, causing this passageway to become even stabler, and also causing the celestial kings at the front lines to feel increased pressure, the Empress deduced. Hunyo took a bite out of her chicken drumstick. No matter what comes, Nyo will beat them all down. The Rain Emperor said, then we should first check the Saintly Origin Academy out. Everyone nodded in agreement. As many as 22 9th heaven celestial kings had moved together to set up an academy. Just how astounding was this? Merely in terms of backers, this had surpassed any great sect in this world. All right, we'll first take a look at the Saintly Origin Academy. Ling Han nodded as well. In this way, probably all the prodigies in the entire celestial realm would gather there. By then, he would be able to meet the most outstanding prodigies of the world. As for the Imperial Void Sect, he'd just leave that for later. In any case, it would not be going anywhere. However, they did not immediately set out to the Twin Horses' heavenly realm, but rather went to find a mystery realm for severing mundane Tyr. Helian Xuanxue and the other women had been improved in all aspects, and had the confidence that they could strike the heaven and earth to advance into the severing mundane Tyr. In the past, they had not dared to deliver the strike knot that they could not. Now, success would follow naturally when the conditions were right. Meanwhile, the Rain Emperor first went to break through to the Heaven Soul. They all promised to meet again at Lishui City of the Twin Horses, Heavenly Realm. Thus, Ling Han brought the women with him, searching for the closest severing mundane tier, mystery realm that would be opening soon. Their luck was not too bad. A severing mundane tier mystery realm would be opening 27 years later. They immediately made their way there. They spent over 3 years on the journey, then waited for another 20-odd years, and the women joined hands as they entered. Ling Han could not do anything to help here and could only wait outside. Thankfully, 2 years later, not one of the women was missing, and they all walked out of the mystery realm. Furthermore, they had all broken through to the severing mundane tier. Ling Han naturally did not expect that they would all attain the 5th severance. It was already enough that they could successfully strike the heaven and earth. They then headed towards the Twin Horses, Heavenly Realm. This delay lasted over 2 decades, and in this time a great many events had happened. The most sensational event was naturally the establishment of the Saintly Origin Academy. It was indeed set up by over 29th Heaven celestial kings in cooperation, and those that would be enrolling were all exceptional prodigies of the generation. However, this was not just limited to cultivation. Prodigies of alchemy, geniuses of formations, and skilled artisans would also be included. As long as they had one particular field of expertise, they all had a chance of enrolling into the academy. But no matter the case, the most famous naturally would be cultivation prodigies. In these 20-plus years' time, the Saintly Origin Academy had a few disciples whose names rang out loudly through the celestial realm, and it could practically be claimed that they were unknown to no one. Ji Wuming actually managed to make his way in as well. Ling Han was dumbfounded. Chapter 2197, Deliberately Causing Difficulties. Chapter 2197, Deliberately Causing Difficulties. There were a few disciples of Saintly Origin Academy that were incredibly outstanding and had become world-renowned in a short 20-plus years' time. Ji Wuming, Shi Chanzi, Hong Huang, and Jialan were the 4 most famous of them. It was said that they all had overwhelming battle prowess, and even the elites of the older generation were incredibly wary of them. Ling Han was not surprised that Ji Wuming could stand out among the rest and become the most outstanding disciple of Saintly Origin Academy, but rather because this guy killed people like he was cutting grass and innumerable prodigies had died in his hands. So how could he possibly be so successful in such a grandiose manner in the Saintly Origin Academy? However, these Shi Chanzi, Hong Huang, and Jialan could be mentioned on equal terms with Ji Wuming, which means that their strength is definitely in no way inferior to Ji Wuming's. This is very frightening. Ling Han mumbled. Freaks like himself and Ji Wuming should only rarely appear in Epic Zone had obtained the precious treasure of a heavenly venerate, while the other was a reincarnated 9th Heaven celestial king. This was too unique. But upon further thought, wasn't the Rain Emperor also very freakish? The Rain Emperor could form 9 divided souls, so why couldn't there be others that could do the same? Ling Han's fighting spirit involuntarily blazed. He had always considered Ji Wuming as his only rival, but now there were another 3 heaven-defying freaks, and he very much longed to have a battle with these people. Ling Han had not wasted his time in these 20-plus years. He had practically spent all of it cultivating inside the Black Tower, tempering the dividing soul tier to an incredibly sturdy extent before he would attempt to break through to the immortal palace tier. If he wanted to become the strongest, his foundations definitely had to be very firm and stable. He definitely could not act with undue haste. 20-odd years wasn't much. Ling Han surmised that he would probably need another 100 years to be able to polish dividing soul tier to a faultless extent, and this naturally was in real time. Put in the Black Tower, this period of time would be astonishingly long. He had not made any breakthrough in cultivation, but in alchemy, Ling Han saw some hope. He was only a step away from 7th refinement. In 10 years at most, I will definitely achieve 7th refinement, he said with a nod. Mainly, it was because he had too few celestial medicines, and you couldn't make bricks without straws. It could not be helped. Celestial medicines were celestial medicines. Even if they weren't very old, they were still extremely rare to come by. I'll find second brother first, then head to the Saintly Origin Academy. With so many ninth heaven celestial kings working together, their goal probably isn't just to nurture a few more ninth heaven celestial kings, but rather heavenly venerable tears, Ling Han mumbled to himself. It can be imagined just how astonishing the cultivation resources of the Saintly Origin Academy would be, and even celestial medicines would be freely given, the Empress said. Niu wants to eat. Hu Niu shouted loudly. Ling Han laughed. All right, let's set out then. The majority had entered into the Black Tower, continuing to work hard on cultivation. Their cultivation levels were too low, and on long-distance journeys, they would greatly influence their speed. Thus, it was just Ling Han, the Empress, and Hu Niu that were traveling together. Spending another 3 years' time, they finally arrived at the Twin Horses' heavenly realm. After entering into the Twin Horses' heavenly realm, it was much faster for them to arrive at Lishui City. They only spent half a month's time, and they already reached Lishui City. As per usual, entering the city required payment of entrance fees, and for Ling Han, this was naturally not a big deal. Though the Empress and Hu Niu were both astoundingly beautiful, their presence was too strong, intimidating those guards to the point that they did not dare to say much, nor did they encounter any profligate young masters, so it was natural that they did not face much trouble. Thus, they eagerly entered into the city and began asking around about the whereabouts of the Rain Emperor. Since they had separated, 30 years had already passed. Ling Han was sure that the Rain Emperor had long since broken through to the Heaven Soul and had come to wait in this city. Ling Han felt that as long as the Rain Emperor had arrived first, this second brother of his would definitely find a way that he could use to find him. Why? The Rain Emperor was a man who had once been an emperor, and he had been a wise emperor at that. How could he possibly be incapable of accomplishing such a small task? Indeed, Ling Han only needed to make some queries, and discovered that 2 alchemical pill pharmacies had been newly opened in the city. One was called the Rain Imperial Pavilion, while the other was named Han Lin Pavilion. These 2 stores had to have been opened by the Rain Emperor, whose goal was to lure Ling Han over. As expected, the Rain Emperor had his ways. Ling Han made some queries. Because the Rain Imperial Pavilion was nearer, he naturally headed there. He went by himself, while Hu Niu and the Empress brought the other women shopping. The cities of the celestial realm were all like this. Though they were called cities, they were as large as planets. So even though the Rain Imperial Pavilion was nearer to Ling Han, it was still tens of thousands of km away. Thankfully, this was only the matter of a short while to the present Ling Han. Very soon, he arrived at a great city. In truth, this could only be called a town. No matter how big it was still a town. There naturally couldn't be a city within another city. He entered the town, and soon arrived at the Rain Imperial Pavilion. However, as his eyes swept over, he couldn't help but frown. The store was in a complete mess. Tables and chairs collapsed. Many workers were either seated or lying down, all of them bearing traces of blood and bruised all over. Some had even broken limbs. Had someone just wreaked havoc here? Ling Han walked over and asked, "Where is your boss?" "Apologies, our store needs to rest and reorganize for a while, so please go elsewhere, honored customer." A middle-aged man approached him, and he was actually a severing, mundane tear. However, there was a shocking black eye around his left eye. Clearly, he had been beaten by someone. Originally, he had quite a refined manner, but now he appeared extremely battered. Ling Han chuckled. "I am a friend of your boss." The middle-aged man glanced at Ling Han, and then an expression of dawning realization appeared on his face. "Dear customer, is your surname Ling?" Ling Han. Ling Han nodded. Please wait a moment. The middle-aged man immediately looked respectful. My master has already received the news and will be arriving soon. Please enter the store and have some tea first, honored guest. All right, Ling Han agreed. He was just about to ascend to the second floor when over a dozen people suddenly burst in, all of them bearing expressions of malice. Why are you back again? The middle-aged man asked shakily, a clear expression of fear on his face. From the word again, it was clear that it was these people that had caused mass damage in the store previously and had heavily beaten the staff as well. Ling Han's feet suddenly paused, and he turned to look at these people. These people were not weak, either. 7 of them had reached the severing mundane tier, while the others were Genesis tiers. In a 1-star city, this was already enough to establish a noble clan, naturally here to collect money. A severing mundane tier sat down on the only chair that was still intact. Haven't we just paid? The middle-aged man appeared slightly angered. These people were without conscience. They had already collected their protection fees, yet still gave them a beating, destroying a great many items in the shop as well. The severing mundane tier that was seated was a large bearded man. Crossing his legs, he had the air of a ruffian. What we previously collected was the protection fees for you opening a pharmacy. However, I heard that your place also conducts prostitution, so we have to collect another sum for that. Prostitution. The middle-aged man's mouth gaped. This is a pharmacy, so how could it possibly be related to prostitution? This was practically lying through his teeth and deliberately bullying them. Ling Han turned around and descended the stairs, asking, You are under someone's command, right? Come, tell me, who commanded you to do such a thing? Small gangs collected protection fees, and Ling Han understood that. But something like this was already within the category of purposely causing trouble and making things difficult. The bearded man stared blankly and asked, What nonsense are you spouting? Furthermore, who do you think you are? Ling Han stretched out a hand, and everyone only felt their vision blur before the bearded man had fallen into Ling Han's hands. He smilingly asked, You can choose either to talk or not to talk, but I have a fondness, and that is to tear people into pieces. Are you interested in giving it a try? Chapter 2198, Young Master June. Chapter 2198, Young Master June. Involuntarily, the bearded man couldn't help but feel his heart go cold. He had not taken Ling Han to heart at all, but who would have thought that the latter would have such terrifying strength? With just a move, he had been captured as easily as blowing off dust. Just when he saw how Ling Han's gaze became vicious, he couldn't help but shiver and answer, I'll talk. It's our gang leader that told me to come. Oh, and who is your gang leader? Ling Han asked smilingly. As he spoke, he clapped the bearded man's shoulder with each word. With every clap on his shoulder, the bearded man couldn't help but inhale sharply and exclaim in pain, his forehead producing cold sweat. Our gang leader is Mao Haitao, the bearded man answered very simply and directly. Ling Han gave an "Oh," and asked, It can't be that your gang leader has gone crazy for no reason, and ordered that you people come and cause trouble, right? The bearded man answered, It's Lu Jun, young Master June, that sought out our gang leader, and asked that the gang leader step out for him to cause some trouble for the Rain Emperor. Oh, and who is this Lu Jun? Ling Han was slightly intrigued. Young Master June! The bearded man dragged out his words, his whole person becoming smug, as if he was a completely changed person. However, when Ling Han clapped a hand on his shoulder, he immediately behaved and answered, Young Master June is a disciple of the Saintly Origin Academy. When he spoke the words Saintly Origin Academy, even his eyes had grown bright. To the majority of residents of the celestial realm, Ninth Heaven's celestial king was naturally the strongest existence in the world, and the saintly origin academy that had been founded by more than 29th Heaven celestial kings naturally was overwhelmingly awesome too. Any person that could enroll into the academy had to be a top-tier prodigy and would definitely become a mighty figure in future. This Lu Jun was a disciple of saintly origin academy and naturally revered like a god by the bearded man. Is he very strong? Ling Han asked, smiling. Those prodigies like Yan Xianlu would definitely be qualified to enroll into Saintly Origin Academy, but they clearly were not the same level as Ji Wuming, Shi Chanzi, and the others, so which category did this Lu Jun belong to? Young Master Jun is from the Alchemy Institution. At a young age, he is already a 3-star alchemist, and has even attained 4th refinement in terms of sect brothers. It is said that he would definitely be able to achieve 5th refinement within the next 100 years and become a 4-star alchemist. The bearded man boasted on behalf of Lu Jun, as if Lu Jun was his brother or son. Alchemist. Ling Han suddenly understood why Lu Jun was targeting the Rain Imperial Pavilion. It was probably connected to alchemy. Then do you know why Lu Jun wants you to do this? The bearded man nodded and replied, Young Master Jun has his eye on the location of the Rain Imperial Pavilion and wants to buy this place to open up his own pharmacy, but the owner of this place refused. Thus, young Master Jun came up with this way, wanting to chase that owner away. Ling Han couldn't help but smirk coldly. The Rain Emperor naturally would not be selling the store here. This was the place for them brothers to reunite. Go back and tell that whatever young Master Jun to personally come and make his apologies within the next 3 days. Additionally, don't forget to pay for the losses experienced here. Even 1 less star stone would not be permitted. Ling Han turned back to the people in the shop. Everyone should be quite angered, right? Come, just act as you will. If any of them dares to fight back, I'll slaughter him. He then looked towards those ruffians, and wherever his eyes passed, those people would be trembling all over, as if their very souls were about to explode. The staff in the shop all exchanged looks for a while. At the beginning, none of them moved, but one of the braver ones finally walked out. Pung, pung, pung. Grabbing hold of one of the gang, he thrashed him harshly. True enough. That person did not dare to resist at all. He only used his arms to protect his head and then bent his legs in to avoid any hits to vital areas. Seeing the situation, the remaining staff also became braver. Gradually, they all came out and beat them up. Being beaten up for no reason, who would not be angered? Previously, it was because they were outmatched, but now that they had someone to back them up, their internal fury naturally could be vented completely. When these staff had thrashed them to their heart's content, Ling Han finally let the bearded man and his group leave. All the staff were looking at Ling Han with admiring expressions and felt like this man was practically a god to them. Ling Han's face bore a slight smile, and he even deliberately took out some alchemical pills, which he distributed among them so that they could heal their injuries. As he saw it, this was not just a place for him and the Rain Emperor to meet up, but could really be used as an actual alchemical pill pharmacy in the future, because he himself was an alchemy prodigy. The Saintly Origin Academy had gathered the most outstanding prodigies of the entire celestial realm, and there were also as many as 22 Ninth Heaven celestial kings as their backers, so it would definitely attract a great many people over. Furthermore, those prodigies that enrolled into the academy would naturally be backed by various great sects as well. This was practically uniting all the great forces of the entire celestial realm in one place. It could be foreseen that this place would eventually become a very prosperous location, which would naturally give rise to endless business opportunities, representing a boundless wealth. At present, Ling Han still placed a high importance on wealth. It could not be helped. The Divine Demon Sword was still only a 4-star pseudo-celestial tool. If he wanted to improve it further, he would naturally need a great amount of level 20 godly metal. This was all money, and the sum was incredibly terrifying. The fact that this place had caught Lu Jun's meant that it was a fortuitous location, So in the future, Ling Han would toss the alchemical pills that he had concocted here, and it naturally could bring an extremely great amount of wealth to him. He had never been one to suffer losses quietly. Since Lu Jun caused such a mess in this place, then he had to pay compensation. There would be no exception for him. In merely half a day's time, the Rain Emperor had returned. Fourth brother. Second brother. The Rain Emperor laughed loudly, striding over from the entrance. His aura surged like an incredibly terrifying ocean. Congratulations, second brother. You have successfully advanced to Heaven's Soul. Ling Han smiled, clasping his hands. The Rain Emperor smiled and pulled Ling Han with him up the stairs. He brewed a pot of tea and shared some tea with Ling Han. The two of them chatted for a while. Though the Rain Emperor had advanced into the Heaven's Soul, it had not been for a long time. Furthermore, there were only time cultivation chambers with 200x time acceleration effects in Lishui City. He had not even reached the peak stage of the Heaven's Soul, so he naturally could not have formed the 9 divided souls. Ling Han related his plans, and the Rain Emperor naturally would not make any objection. He merely told Ling Han to do as he willed, and then entered into the Black Tower. He wanted to form 9 divided souls as soon as possible. The Rain Emperor began to cultivate, and Ling Han summoned all the women. They then settled down in the Rain Imperial Pavilion. Then they began to wait patiently for the arrival of that young Master June. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed, but that young Master June had still not appeared, right until the 4th day. A worker ran up and reported, "Young Master Lin, it's not good. Someone is blocking our doors and demanding to see the person in charge of the shop." Ling Han was just sipping tea with the Empress. They had all cultivated dividing soul tier to a practically flawless extent, so there would be no meaning to go into seclusion for further comprehension. Next, they had to wait for the opening of an Immortal Palace tier, Mystery Realm, and then enter into it for their breakthrough to the Immortal Palace tier. Hence, they were all extremely idle now. Ling Han had placed his focus on alchemy, as the doors to 7th refinement would be opening to him at any moment. "They're here," Ling Han said smilingly to the Empress. At present, his alias was Han Lin, and he had also altered his appearance slightly. With the heaven-deceiving technique, which he had attained great accomplishment in, concealing his aura, even a 9th heaven celestial king would find it very difficult to distinguish his true appearance if they did not observe him closely. The Empress had also used the heaven-deceiving technique to alter her own appearance and aura. Though she was still captivatingly beautiful, she was not as stunningly exquisite as she had been. She nodded. "We'll know when we go downstairs and look for ourselves." Chapter 2199, Compensations. Chapter 2199, Compensations. Ling Han arrived at the first floor, accompanied by the Empress, who Niu had once again ran out to play, previously complaining about how Ling Han did not show her enough affection by accompanying her. As for the other women, they were earnestly cultivating inside the Black Tower. They had unlocked the upper limits of their cultivation level, so they naturally could not bear to waste any more time. When they arrived downstairs, they could see 4 people seated in the VIP area. The person who sat in the forefront was an extremely young-looking man. His fingers were slender, smooth and fair, finer than even those of the majority of women. He was presently sipping tea, his left hand holding the teacup, while his right hand was holding the cup's lid. His ring finger and pinky were slightly raised, appearing very effeminate. However, there were 3 men who had overflowing masculinity seated behind him. One had his eyes closed in a doze, his figure so astonishingly fat that even his flesh was spreading out, inciting fear that the chair he was seated on would collapse at any moment. Another was dressed completely in green, only lacking a green cap on his head. The last person finally looked more normal, but there was a sword lying across his legs, while his right hand was holding tightly the sword's hilt, which was also a little weird. Ling Han had cultivated the heaven-deceiving technique. which could not only conceal his own cultivation level and aura, it would also allow him to be extremely sensitive to the auras of others. He only probed slightly, and he discovered that the effeminate man was Een Soul, while the fat man, man in green, and swordsman were all heaven souls. A Een Soul could actually lord over 3 heaven soul elites. It was either that this sissy had a powerful background, or that he had another identity, which was strong enough to cause even heaven souls to follow his lead. Immediately, a name rose up in Ling Han's mind, Lu Jun. This man was a 3-star alchemist, and in terms of mere status, he was equivalent to an immortal palace-tier. In that case, it was naturally no strange thing for him to have a few heaven souls under his command. "So, you are the new boss of this place?" the effeminate man asked. Ling Han smiled faintly. "So, a sissy like you is Lu Jun?" "A sissy." Lu Jun's body trembled slightly, almost spluttering out the tea that he had just sipped. What part of him was like a sissy? Because the extraction of medicinal ingredients was required for alchemy, he was naturally extremely cautious so as not to damage the medicinal ingredients, and had thus cultivated the habit of being gentle in his actions, such as sticking out his pinky finger. This kind of habit had also been brought into his daily life, but was this considered being a sissy? The man in green suddenly stood up and shouted harshly, "How dare you!" Boom! His voice became a sound wave. Pum, pang, pang, it shattered the floor tiles and rushed out towards Ling Han. Ling Han sent out a casual palm strike. Shwa! The salting sound wave was immediately separated into 2, passing by on either side of himself and the Empress. Pung, 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 it destroyed all the floor tiles, tables, and chairs behind them. He was completely unconcerned. In any case, all of this would ultimately be placed on Lu Jun's tab, and he would be paying compensation. "So, you do have some strength. No wonder you dare to repeatedly refuse my good intentions." Lu Jun humphed, temporarily suppressing the displeasure he felt when Ling Han called him a sissy. "I want this shop, and you can name your price." 100 million star stones, Ling Han answered. Lu Jun immediately looked furious. This broken-down shop's owner actually asked for a price of 100 million star stones. You might as well be committing robbery. Don't misunderstand. Ling Han smiled slightly. This sum is for compensation. You wouldn't be thinking that with you having beaten my people and crashed my shop, the matter would be resolved so simply, right? At this, to say nothing of how Lu Jun was fuming mad, even the fat man had snapped his eyes open, showing a gaze burning with viciousness, while the swordsman had also pulled his sword slightly out of its sheath, blazing with killing intent. "Ha! Ha! Ha!" Lu Jun laughed coldly. "You are really very brave. I have never seen anyone as outrageously brazen as you. However, with no respect and no sense of propriety, a person like you would also die early. Oh, are you threatening me?" Ling Han cracked a smile. "It's not a threat. I am just stating facts." Lu Jun humphed. "Brother Hu, please make your move." Humph! He is unwilling to listen to kind words, and is so determined to make me use force. How preposterous! As his words fell, the fat man stood up. Pah! Once he stood up, the chair he was seated on immediately announced its timely death. "A million star stones," Ling Han kindly reminded him, pointing at the broken chair. Then he turned and said to the fat man, "Are you going to pay yourself, or will you be placing it on the sissy's tab? You are his subordinate, so I might as well just write it on his tab. It would also be more convenient for me to collect." Tear his mouth apart. Lu Jun roared his fury. He was really extraordinarily furious. He was a 3-star alchemist, and had hopes of advancing to become a 4-star alchemist even. To say nothing of how even immortal palace tier elites would have to be polite towards him. Even ascending origin tiers would give him some face, and now Ling Han was repeatedly calling him a sissy. How could he tolerate that? Arrogant fool, you will be paying a painful price for your ignorance. the fat man declared menacingly. Though he was exceedingly fat, the thing he hated others saying the most were words like plump, fat, and so on. He raised his right hand, and an inky black seal lit up. Immediately, a darkness spread out from underneath his feet, extending out in all directions. This was powerful poison, exuding a rotting smell that would induce nausea. Not only was the smell extraordinarily foul, when the floor tiles and everything else were touched by the darkness, they would all be turned into poisonous liquid, and were also emitting waves of black gas. Ha! In my dark poison territory, poison is everywhere, and with just the slightest skin contact, the spirit would immediately be numbed, and then would slowly rot, turning into a pool of poisonous liquid. The fat man laughed loudly. Once his dark poison territory was unfolded, it meant that he had already won half the battle. Ling Han swept an eye over the surroundings and couldn't help but shake his head, saying, "For 1,000,000 star stones, 8,000,000 star stones." With every table, chair, or floor tile that the poison corroded, he would call out a number for compensation, and the number naturally grew increasingly, soon reaching an astronomical sum. At first, the fat man was extremely confident, but after a few breaths, the grin on his face disappeared, and he looked disbelieving. "Why haven't you collapsed yet?" This was not logical. Ling Han glared at him and demanded, "Are you planning on reneging on your debts?" At this, the man in green and the swordsman both stood up, the looks they directed at Ling Han filled with wariness. The aura that Ling Han had at Heaven Soul's level, similar to them, but just now Ling Han had clearly done nothing, but still the poisonous attack of the fat man was completely ineffective. This was something that they could not comprehend, and as a result, it caused a powerful wariness to rise up in them. 240 million star stones. Thanks for the business, Ling Han said smilingly towards Lu Jun. Lu Jun gave Ling Han a profound look, then stood up abruptly and said, "Consider it my error in judgment. As it turned out, the Mere Rain Imperial Pavilion is actually concealing talent as well. This time, I will admit my defeat. Let's go." He turned, planning to leave the shop. However, he had just turned around when he felt a grip tighten on his neck. Then his body lightened as he was forcibly picked up. A familiar face appeared in front of him. Who else could it be but Ling Han? Lu Jun was both angered and astonished. He actually dared to pick up a 3-star alchemist like him by the neck. This was an outrage. On the other hand, he also felt terror. With the fat man and others by his side, Ling Han still managed to capture him. Could it be that the three of them were just props? There was only one reason, and that was Ling Han was too strong, so strong that the fat man and the others did not even have the time to react. "You, what do you want?" he asked in a trembling voice. Chapter 2200, Asking for Intervention. Chapter 2200, Asking for Intervention. "Are you an idiot?" Ling Han shook his head. "I naturally want compensation." "What? You just plan to stride out of here without paying." Lu Jun's face was flushed red. He had never been threatened in this manner by anyone before. No, this was a brazen, undisguised robbery. What, not paying? Ling Han tossed him a glare. Lu Jun felt extremely sullen. As an alchemist, he had innumerable cultivator friends. They all required alchemical pills, so they were naturally very polite to him, or even respecting him highly. Yet, all of a sudden, someone who didn't play by the rules popped out. His superiority complex was immediately completely refuted. He gritted his teeth and answered, "I'll pay." At this moment, he very much hated the fat man and the others. And they called themselves elites? He had wasted a considerable number of alchemical pills on the three of them, but when they were really needed, they were completely useless. The money. Ling Han stretched out a hand. "I haven't brought so many star stones with me," Lu Jun answered, humiliated. "You want credit?" "Sorry, our shop is too small to accept credit." Ling Han patted Lu Jun's shoulder, his expression all smiles. Towards a financial backer, he was naturally very good-tempered. Lu Jun could only search all over himself, and first took out all the star stones contained inside his spatial god tool. This naturally was far from the required sum, so he could only use alchemical pills, medicinal ingredients, and other items as replacement. Ling Han naturally would not mind this. In any case, he was an alchemist as well, so this would save him time. But no matter how, it could not accumulate to a colossal sum as 200 million starstones. Even the fat man, the man in green, and the swordsman emptied all their belongings, and just barely gathered a sum of 150 million starstones. Ling Han waved a hand and said, "I have always been easy to deal with, so forget the remaining sum. Easy to deal with." Lu Jun and the others were almost passing out in fury. Hadn't they just broken some furniture and injured a few people? And they were actually forced to pay a compensation of 200 million starstones. Who else could be as vicious as you? Aren't you guys feeling very grateful? Ling Han asked smilingly, yet his eyes were incredibly dangerous. Grateful, extremely grateful. Lu Jun and the others nodded quickly. Discretion was the better part of valor. At present, they could not afford to anger Ling Han. Go on, then. Ling Han very generously allowed the four of them to leave. After Lu Jun and his group stepped out of the shop, they hurriedly burst into a run and fled. They returned to Saintly Origin Academy. Normally, the man in green and the others would not be qualified to enter into Saintly Origin Academy. Aside from experts in a particular field, cultivators would have to be at least Emperor tiers to qualify for enrollment into Saintly Origin Academy. The goal of the academy was to nurture First Heaven celestial kings at minimum, and there was basically no possibility that king tiers could advance to this level. However, every disciple of the Saintly Origin Academy was allowed to have their own followers, establishing their own forces. Perhaps those mighty figures had also considered that when war broke out with the force of darkness in the future, every student that advanced into Celestial King tier could have their own troops, increasing their power. Hence, the man in green and others were able to follow Lu Jun into Saintly Origin Academy merely. This fact was enough to attract countless cultivators, at present, who did not want to enter into Saintly Origin Academy. Trash! Trash! You all are trash! The moment Lu Jun returned to his accommodations, he threw a tantrum. The Saintly Origin Academy had been co-founded by 22 Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings, and was naturally very extraordinary. Not only was it exceptionally huge, a great many mountains of the celestial realm had even been moved here, with abundant spiritual chi, and they even had unique elemental alignments. There were metal-aligned mountains, and if one cultivated on this mountain, it would be greatly beneficial for those who cultivated the regulations of metal. Similarly, there were also water-aligned mountains covered with ice and snow, entwined with water dragons, as well as lightning-aligned mountains where blazing white lightning flashed endlessly. An alchemist, like Lu Jun, naturally lived on Herb Mountain. The whole mountain was planted with various medicinal ingredients, and there were even some celestial medicines. But the celestial medicines that could be planted were basically of the 5 elements. Even a celestial king could not forcibly bring those like space flowers and plant them here. Lu Jun had an abode here, abundant with spiritual chi. It was beneficial for cultivation as well as concocting alchemical pills. The man in green and the others all lowered their heads, making no sound. What could they say? They had indeed been utterly useless. In fact, because they had damaged the furniture, they had increased Lu Jun's debts, but they were also feeling very wronged. Initially, their cultivation level as heaven souls was already very strong, and even the top-grade prodigies in the academy had just broken through to the immortal palace tier. So wasn't heaven soul strong enough? Yet the reality was really so bloody and harsh that the 3 of them had no way to excuse themselves. After Lu Jun threw a tantrum, he slowly calmed down. "I must exact this revenge," he declared. That was natural. To say nothing else, merely the fact that Ling Han had swindled him out of 150 million starstones could not be dismissed just like that. This was all the wealth that he had saved up with much difficulty over tens of millions of years, and just the thought of it caused his heart to ache to the point of throwing up blood. This guy should be a Heaven's Soul Emperor tier, he deduced. Otherwise, there was no way he could have easily captured him despite the protection of the man in green and the others. The Saintly Origin Academy has ruled that only Emperor tiers would be qualified to join the selections, yet he has opened a pharmacy here, which means that he had not passed the selections. Otherwise, there would be no way that I would not know of such a character. Since that's the case, I will ask a Heaven's Soul Monarch tier to interfere, and he would definitely be easily suppressed. Just in time, Guyushu has just asked me to concoct a secret construct pill for him. If I ask him to interfere on my behalf, he will definitely oblige. All right, I will ask for his intervention. Though they said they would be shopping, Hunyo was the first to run back alone. Too boring, she complained the moment she ran in the doors, talking about how the food here was not delicious at all. Just when she was energetically complaining, she heard a cold laugh. Lu Jun had come back. "Han Lin," he said menacingly. After experiencing a loss, he had naturally investigated Ling Han's identity. "You have scammed me out of so much, and not only do I want you to pay me back in full, it has to be doubled." Ling Han's ears were just about to explode from Hunyo's tortuous rants when he saw Lu Jun suddenly appear. Involuntarily, he was overjoyed. This was a kind man that had come to rescue him from his suffering. He shook his head at Hunyo, expressing to her that it was time for serious matters now. Hunyo was already very displeased in the first place. Immediately, she turned her head and glared harshly at Lu Jun. It was true that Lu Jun was an alchemy prodigy, but in cultivation he did not have much exceptional natural talent. His Tao heart naturally wasn't very strong. With such a glare from Hunyo, he immediately stumbled backwards, almost collapsing on the ground. He hadn't collapsed, not because he had overcome the chills in his heart, but because someone behind him had stretched out a hand, placing it on his back and preventing him from embarrassing himself. This was a very handsome and dashing young man dressed in white robes. His hair was thick and black as ink, each strand exuding a divine light, as if he was a divine being. However, while he was handsome and dashing indeed, his expression was filled with arrogance. He glanced at Ling Han and declared, "Return all the wealth that you have tricked him for, and double that as compensation. Then I will break your arm, and this matter will be considered resolved. Breaking your arm is because you have forced me to act." He pointed at his own chest. "When I, Guyushu, make a move, there has never been an occasion when no blood is spilled." Arrogant, he was really very arrogant. Involuntarily, Ling Han's interest was piqued. He turned to Lu Jun and asked, "Where did you find this idiot? He's really very funny." Chapter 2201, Compensation Again? Chapter 2201, Compensation Again. "Are you seeking death?" Lu Jun had not answered, but Guyushu was already humping coldly. His eyes were focused directly on Ling Han, exuding a menacing chill. Only then did Lu Jun say, "Do you know who he is? Brother Gu is an A-grade student of the Saintly Origin Academy, a great monarch tier. Though he is a heaven soul like you, his strength overwhelms the strength of an emperor tier like you by who knows how many times over." Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. "How do you know that I am an emperor tier? What if I, too, am a monarch tier? What a joke!" Guyushu scoffed. "Monarch tiers will definitely be qualified to enroll in the academy, and only emperor tiers will be qualified to join the selections. It must be that you have not passed the selections and are willing to leave due to your reluctance. That's why you have stayed until now. As a cultivator, to actually make a living from selling alchemical pills, how humiliating!" Ling Han laughed loudly. If you're so awesome, don't ingest any alchemical pills yourself then. Yet Gu Yushu couldn't even be bothered to pay any regard to him. In his eyes, alchemists were only tools that served cultivators. If it were not for the fact that he required a great amount of secret construct pills to break through to the immortal palace tier, even Lu Jun would be below his notice. He had a low opinion of chefs, but how could it be that he would not eat? And now, not only will I be crippling one of your arms, I will also be slapping that stinky mouth of yours into pieces, Gu Yushu declared balefully. Lu Jun immediately nodded in quick succession. He also hated Ling Han's mouth very much. The two of you get lost. Hunyeo bared her teeth, looking vicious. When Lu Jun and Gu Yushu's eyes swept over, they both looked stunned. It wasn't that they had not spotted Hunyeo previously. It was just that their entire focus was on Ling Han. It was just a passing glance, and they had not looked closely at her. But it was a different story now. With Hunyeo interrupting like this, they immediately saw her clearly. This girl was very beautiful, very pure, and like a sparkling stream, giving comfort to anyone who saw her. "Step aside!" Gu Yushu exclaimed. However, though his voice carried a command, his tone wasn't very severe. Hunyeo placed her hands on her hips and declared, "Despicable, Nyo is already very angry today, and you people actually dare to anger Nyo further. Humph, you guys are finished. Nyo will **s rape you." Hearing these words, even Ling Han broke out in a cold sweat. He had set a wrong example only once, and the little girl had been completely corrupted. Gu Yushu's expression darkened, showing a hint of displeasure. Hunyeo had also cultivated the heaven-deceiving technique, so there were some slight changes to her appearance and bearing. Though she was still very beautiful, just like the Empress, she was considerably less beautiful than the fine, exquisite beauty she had been previously. Thus, though Gu Yushu admired Hunyeo's beauty, it had not reached the point of complete captivation. "Miss, you are making a miss." Pum! He had not even said all his words when a fair, delicate tiny fist was already crashing towards him. Though this fist was incredibly graceful, Gu Yushu immediately broke out in a cold sweat. He felt that if this fist actually landed on him, he would definitely suffer a serious injury. In this instant, he did not have the time to consider how Hunyeo could be so strong, and hurriedly raised his arms, forming a cross in front of him. The punch landed, and a shield of light immediately took form in front of him. There was the azure dragon howling, the white tiger roaring, the vermilion bird spreading its wings, and the black tortoise holding up the heavens. Hunyeo's fist stopped forcibly, but the little girl did not withdraw her fist. Instead, she humphed, and boom, a layer of bright flames immediately wrapped around her tiny fist. Source power of heaven and earth, purple spirit flames. Instantly, cracks appeared in the shield of light in front of Gu Yushu. Crack, crack, crack. The cracks became larger and larger, and the shield finally crumbled resoundingly. Hunyeo's punch shot straight in, but Gu Yushu had also gained a chance to catch his breath back. With a tap of his foot, he hurriedly retreated. He was involuntarily astonished. What he had used now was the 4 divisions technique, which had been created by an 8th heaven celestial king. He had also mastered the cultivation technique completely, but because of his cultivation level, he was unable to execute its greatest might yet. However, this should not be something that could be broken by an elite of the same level, either, especially when it had just sustained a single punch. That fire was too terrifying. Ah! He suddenly grabbed his head, feeling a frightening intent barraging his spirit. Instantly he was bleeding from all his orifices, making for a tragic sight. The purple spirit flames did not just have a terrifying physical attack, but also targeted one's spirit. How could Gu Yushu have possibly predicted that Hunyeo possessed a source power of heaven and earth? That was something that was very difficult for even celestial kings to obtain. Peng! Hun Yo's battle awareness was incredibly strong. She had long since approached and waved her fists repeatedly. Peng! 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 She thrashed Gu Yushu harshly. Initially, even if Gu Yushu was inferior to Ling Han, it would not go as far as this. But who asked that he was careless? For those that had reached a pinnacle like theirs, the slightest misstep would mean losing the whole battle. Gu Yushu could only parry repeatedly, but Hun Yo's stamina was extremely frightening. Though she was still inferior to Ling Han, she had long since reached the immortal palace tier in terms of stamina, and because of this, her frequency and speed of attack far surpassed Gu Yushu's. Peng! 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 Hun Yo's fists showered like rain, and Gu Yushu could only retreat continuously. As he retreated, he would naturally crash into tables, chairs, the wall, and so on. Undoubtedly, whatever he crashed into would immediately crumble. Meanwhile, Ling Han was smilingly counting on the sidelines. 1,000,000 star stones, 2,000,000 star stones. With every number he spoke, he would glance at Lu Jun, and the latter couldn't help but want to stomp in fury. It was not him that had caused the destruction, so what did it have to do with him? Moreover, there were a great many things that had been broken by Hun Yo, so why were they placed on his tab as well? After complaining internally, Lu Jun's heart was also throbbing madly. It was extremely possible that Gu Yushu was no match for that beauty. How was this possible? Gu Yushu was a grand monarch tier, and Hun Yo was not an immortal palace tier either, so how could Gu Yushu be beaten to the point that he could not even fight back at all? Hiss! This meant that Hun Yo was also a monarch tier herself. But why would a monarch tier not have enrolled into Saintly Origin Academy? 30 years had already passed. Would Gu Yushu lose? This thought came to being in his mind. At first, he did not have the slightest doubt about Gu Yushu's strength and those that could suppress Gu Yushu. There was practically no one in the Heaven Soul. At most, they could only be his equal. Yet now, Lu Jun was filled with worry. There was worry for Gu Yushu and worry for his own purse as well. Previously, Ling Han had glanced at him with every number he called out. Clearly, he was going to be treated as the spendthrift fool again. Gu Yushu, you must counter bravely. Too bad. Things turned out contrary to his wishes. Gu Yushu had not found a point where he could counter, but was instead being suppressed by Hun Yo harder and harder. Not only did Hun Yo have astonishing natural talent in cultivation, her battle awareness was also extraordinary. In a situation where the battle prowess of both sides was more or less equal, as long as she could find the chance, there was practically no possibility for even Ling Han to turn the tables around. Then how would Gu Yushu accomplish that? Because Hun Yo had already come close enough to him. He did not even have the time to summon a treasure, like a pseudo-celestial tool or decree. He could only deal endlessly with Hun Yo's fists that rained down like a heavy shower. Otherwise, if he was just hit once, even if he did manage to take out a decree or pseudo-celestial tool, he might be completely knocked out too. He could only defend his vital areas. Because his speed of attack was completely inferior to Hun Yo's, the parts like his arms, legs, and feet could only be given up. Even if he was beaten, there was nothing he could do. As they fought, he continued to retreat. Because Hun Yo was suppressing him completely, he could not turn the tables around with his own power. What else could he do but retreat? Pung! 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 With his retreat, he very quickly created a large hole in the wall of the pharmacy. This would be 20,000,000 star stones, Ling Han said to Lu Jun. What did that have to do with him? Lu Jun wanted to cry, but had no tears. He really didn't have any more money. Chapter 2202, Collecting on Behalf. Chapter 2202, Collecting on Behalf. Pung! Gu Yushu was still retreating, and he destroyed another wall. That's another 20,000,000. Ling Han totaled the compensation. Lu Jun could no longer hold back. He jumped up and exclaimed, That isn't even your shop. Right, Gu Yushu had retreated out of the pharmacy. The wall he had crashed through belonged to another shop, and the latter did not have the slightest relation with Rain Imperial Pavilion. Ling Han glared at him. You are such a busybody. Can't it be that I am collecting on the owner's behalf? Collecting on behalf. Lu Jun shuddered. He looked behind Gu Yushu, and it was densely covered with buildings. As he retreated, he continued his path of destruction. If Ling Han was collecting on their behalf as well, then would Lu Jun be able to pay for the compensations even if he sold himself into service for the rest of his life? Gu Yushu, you should rise up and counter, I beg you. Unfortunately, the heavens did not heed his plea, and neither did Gu Yushu. He was still destroying one wall after another loudly, and Ling Han called out numbers that would make one's heart race in quick succession. Lu Jun felt like he was about to pass out, though he had seen the world. When he thought of the debts that he might have to bear, his face turned ashen. However, his worries soon ended. It was not that Gu Yushu had managed to rise up and counter, finally getting a chance at victory, but rather that he had finally been defeated by Hunyao and had been pressed onto the ground while he was being beaten harshly. Then it was natural that there was no way that he could destroy any more walls, chairs, or anything else. 980 million starstones. Thanks for the business. Ling Han looked at Lu Jun, smiling widely. Lu Jun felt his vision darken. He had really passed out. Firstly, it was due to anxiety, and secondly, because of anger. How could anyone do that? They had just destroyed a few walls, a few tables and chairs, and they had to pay so much. *S-rape. *S-rape. Hunyao returned energetically, holding Gu Yushu up by the scruff of his neck. When she arrived at the doors of the pharmacy, she gave a careless toss, and Gu Yushu was sprawled out on the ground, and very coincidentally his behind was raised high. The little girl took out a metal rod, her expression filled with anticipation. Stop, stop, stop. Ling Han hurriedly stretched out his hand to stop her. It was fine to play around, or use it as a threat, but you couldn't actually do it. No, Hunyao wants to play. Hunyao pouted. It's not fun, Ling Han persuaded. It's fun. Hunyao acted spoiled. Ling Han directly stuffed a chicken drumstick into Hunyao's mouth. Be good and eat some meat. Hunyao was still mumbling, very much wanting to spit out this drumstick to express her displeasure. But this chicken drumstick was unexpectedly especially delicious, and she could not bring herself to spit out. She could only chew on it viciously, as if she was venting her displeasure. As she ate, she looked regretfully at Gu Yushu's behind. She had not forgotten her idea of an *S-rape at all. Even if he was heavily injured and slightly out of his wits, Gu Yushu suddenly felt a chill rise up in his heart. Cultivators had an instinctive feeling about danger, especially when it was a monarch tier like him. Ling Han grabbed both Gu Yushu and Lu Jun and stuffed them into chairs. With a tremor of origin power, the both of them slowly came back to consciousness. The first thing they saw was naturally Ling Han's widely smiling face. His expression was completely innocent and harmless. Yet Lu Jun was incredibly clear just how vicious the heart that lay behind this face could be. Then they saw Hunyao, who was chewing on a chicken drumstick, looking like she was enjoying herself one moment, and then glaring at them ferociously the next, causing chills to rise up in both their hearts. They could tell now that this girl wasn't the type to be reasoned with. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Come, let us discuss the matter of compensation." "I have no more money." Lu Jun was very frank. "You know that I am not lying." Previously, he had already emptied all his savings. Ling Han glanced at Gu Yushu again. "I don't care which of you is paying, as long as the bill is completely cleared." "How much do you want?" "I'll pay," Gu Yushu said proudly, and tossed a disdainful look at Lu Jun. And he called himself an alchemist? He couldn't even pay compensation for a few broken walls and chairs. Lu Jun shook his head internally, thinking, "Brother, you are going to cry later." This guy would not blink before ripping someone off. Very straightforward. Ling Han clapped a hand on Gu Yushu's shoulder. I like the straightforward type, like you. A mild amount of self-satisfaction actually rose up in Gu Yushu, but he immediately chased it away. All right then, 980 million star stones. And since you are so straightforward, I'll make it a whole sum for you, so it will be 1 billion star stones, Ling Han said. Gu Yushu instantly gaped, looking at Ling Han in disbelief. His only thought was this person must have either gone mad, or his brain must have been burnt to actually dare ask for such an exorbitant sum. Wasn't it just a few chairs and walls? 1 star stone was completely enough. Ling Han was displeased now and demanded, "What is the meaning of that look and expression? You don't want to pay compensation? And you were just patting your chest so confidently, saying that you were very straightforward. But why have you become petty now?" Gu Yushu shivered and then said, "But it can't be as exaggerated as 1 billion. Furthermore, when others made it a whole sum, they reduced the amount, but in your case, you were increasing the price. Are you saying that I am screwing you over?" Ling Han looked towards Lu Jun. "Come, you say it. Aren't I always so honest and sincere, fair, and just to the point of public indignation?" Lu Jun was in no mood to complain about Ling Han's improper use of words. Being looked at by Ling Han with such a cheery, but actually filled with killing intent, stare, how could he possibly dare to say anything that was detrimental to Ling Han? "Young Master Han is the most just," he hurriedly declared. "You see." Ling Han clapped his hands, as expected, written all over his face. Gu Yushu really wanted to kick Lu Jun to the ground. What were you cowering for? This place was Li Shui City, and they were also disciples of Saintly Origin Academy. How could Ling Han dare to do anything to them? Though it was not that all 22 Ninth Heaven celestial kings were based here, as long as 1 or 2 of them were present, their divine sense could reach all corners, so how could they possibly sit by and watch them get killed? Of course, a 9th Heaven celestial king couldn't possibly bother with trifle matters like this, either. This was also why Ling Han dared to publicly blackmail them like this. Who asked them to trifle with him first? No matter how much he ripped them off, he was in the right. "It's too much," Gu Yushu said, lowering his head. Though Ling Han was really too vicious, he actually could not take out so much money, which was also slightly embarrassing for him. "Ah, you're so poor." Ling Han looked like he was mourning for his misfortune. "And you call yourself a monarch tier?" Gu Yushu felt very wronged. If the resources that were poured into him were traded for star stones, then to say nothing of 1 billion, it was even more than 10 billion. But how could the money spent on him be compared to the money he actually had? Even for a monarch tier like himself, it was already very impressive if he had 100 million star stones, and 1 billion was really too much. "Give me some time, and I'll definitely collect the amount." He forced out the answer through gritted teeth, unable to bear such humiliation. He would rather first throw the 1 billion star stones onto Ling Han, then ask someone to help and deal with Ling Han, taking the star stones back. How can that be allowed? What if you renege on your debt? Ling Han shook his head. "I definitely won't." Gu Yushu guaranteed again. "Stop spouting nonsense, and take out all your money first." Ling Han took out a steel rod. "If you continue to chatter needlessly, I will *S-rape both of you first." Hunyo immediately pouted, and he said that *S-rape wasn't fun. It was clear that he himself wanted to play, but did not allow her to. Both Lu Jun's and Gu Yushu's face were pale with fear. If they were to be publicly *S-raped, how would they be able to face others in the future? "I'll pay. I'll pay," both of them hurriedly called out.